Ready on WebEx and FairTV? Okay, great. All right, I would like to call the special meeting of the town of Fairfield, Thursday, March 23rd, 2023. Can we please rise for the pledge? Okay, thank you. Can the clerk, Ann Roche is here tonight, guest appearance. Take the roll, please.
Edward Bateson, Marty Fury, Melissa Longo, Amy Ruggiero, Bill Gerber, Karen McCormick, Cindy Perham, Jeff Steele, Alex Durrell, Jeff Galdenzi,
Here.
Tom Lambert, Sharon Pistilli, Laura Carson, Michelle McCabe, Marcy Spolier, Elizabeth Zezima, Jennifer Barahona, Josh Garskoff, Joe Siebert, Jay Walk, Steve Barris, Hannah Gale, Andrew Gusefa, Lisa Havey, John Kuhn, Mark McDermott, Jill Vergara, Karen Wackerman, Cameron Chiniski,
Here.
Hank Ferentz, Pam Iacono, Jim Myers, Christine Brown, Drew Georgiadis, Margaret Horton, Kelly Cinto, Ken Astorita, Peter Britton, Brooks Baracino, Story Tallman. We have a quorum. Mr. Moderator.
Okay, thank you, Ann. Okay, item number 2, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Finance. Resolved that the resolution entitled "A Resolution Appropriating $10,600,000 for costs related to construction, remediation, and addressing the notice of violation at Penfield Pavilion be and hereby is approved." Can I have a motion to approve? Representative Wackerman, seconded by Representative Iacono. I'll turn it over now to the administration.
How about now? Thank you. Most of you may have seen it, but we have a presentation for those of you who haven't watched the meetings. And I'll go through it as quickly as I can. Penfield Pavilion, the history. So a lot of people have asked, what is the history? And as we know, this has sort of been going on since 2006. And then you see the timeline, 2011, 2012, December 2015, 2016, and all of the history of it, of the pavilion. I think most notably you want to say, the construction started in February of 2016 on rebuilding the pavilion with a scope of work that was different from what FEMA originally approved. And then August of 2016, FEMA sent written notice that revised scope of work was not complying with local and NFIP regulations, and commencing the revised SAO without FEMA approval violated the reimbursement conditions. And construction continued despite FEMA's notice. In March of 2017, 4.5 years after the hurricane, Penfield Pavilion is reconstructed, costing $7.3 million, and it reopens. November 18, FEMA confirmed the town is ineligible for reimbursement and reconfirmed the town's noncompliance with the floodplain management requirements. January 2019, the town submitted its first appeal to FEMA's decision, and then in June of 2019, it was denied. August of 19, the town submitted a second appeal to FEMA's decision. In March of 21, FEMA notified the state the second appeal was denied. In June of 21, the town was notified that FEMA's denial of the town's second appeal, and notified for the first time that the NOV would be reinstated. In July of 21, my administration begins discussions with FEMA on options to address the NOV. And then in June, between June and October of 21, negotiations begin to review and identify the scope of the NOV with FEMA. Town engages in professional consultants to develop conceptual options for review. Discussions with our LEP to determine potential remediation plans for the Julian Fill. February through May 22, develop detailed conceptual plans to respond to the NOV. Letters sent to FEMA outlining the options for compliance. In August 22, RFQs were issued for construction manager, architect, and structural geotechnical coastal engineers. Town hall meeting was held for elected officials by my administration, proposing a plan to finance all aspects of the Julian Fill remediation and the Penfield NOV compliance. September 2022, I sent an email to all town boards with follow-up information requested at the 8/31 meeting, and the RFQ interviews for construction manager and an A&E services. October 22, CFO presents to all town boards with a proposal to fund the remediation and the Penfield NOV. November 22, schematics and site plans are sent to FEMA. Letter to FEMA with questions from elected officials. Elected officials requested documentation in writing from FEMA before voting. January 2023, FEMA responses to schematics with comments, and the administration contacts Congressman Himes to assist in FEMA's attendance at a town hall meeting. February 10th, 2023, conference call with FEMA to discuss the town hall meeting outline and how they wanted it to be. And this is when FEMA notified us for the first time that the downgrade deadline would be March 31. Oh, sorry.
What's the issue on WebEx? Somebody just wrote in the chat.
How about now? Oh, he said better. Okay. Sorry about that. February 2023, Zoom meeting with FEMA and the administration and Congressman Shea's office and himself and his office and the state delegation to go over Congressman Himes to go over what we learned and how we were going to proceed. February 27th, the CS retrograde letter was received from FEMA. So, well, why are we here? We know why we're here. We have contaminated soil under the building, and we also have a building that is out of compliance with FEMA's with their regulations. Where are we? If the town basically, if we don't already, if the town doesn't comply with this corrective action by the end of March regarding the notice of violation, we're facing a myriad of negative consequences that will impact our residents in the town. What must the town do? Well, we adopt a plan to address the notice of violation of the gray beams regarding the pavilion and the consent order from the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection and the Environmental Protection Agency for the contaminated soil, which is the Julian Fill under the building. The FEMA NOV, fix the main structure excluding the locker room portion, which is not out of compliance, to bring it into compliance by lowering the elevation of the grade beams. The alternative to comply is knocking down the main structure and removing the grade beams. Deep in EPA, we remove all the Julian Fill, contaminated fill, as you've heard us talk about in the past. We're assuming it's about 5 or 6 feet based on invoices that were submitted by former town employees, but we won't really know until we're down there. We're hoping it is accurate, but that price of the contaminated fill is sort of an unknown. We're hoping it's about 5 or 6 feet. Okay, what happens if we don't comply? So the town, I know this is kind of confusing and there's been a lot of conversations about it. So if the town is a member of the FEMA community rating system, which awards our communities that go above and beyond the minimum standards, and we have been a good standing member for some time. We have a Class 8 CRS community for all our flood insurance policyholders, including our policies for our town-owned buildings in the special flood hazard area. And those residents receive a 10% flood insurance discount. FEMA has initiated steps to downgrade the town CRS, the result which would eliminate the discount. The date that they're describing as a point of no return, but not final, but is March 31st, meaning that if the town has not demonstrated significant progress remediating the violation funding and approved plan, then notification to insurance companies would ensue, and they can't pull that back. And I think I talked about this a bit at the Board of Finance meeting, just for your edification. You know, when we started these conversations with FEMA in the beginning, FEMA was not happy with the town of Fairfield. And that doesn't mean they weren't happy with me or my administration. They simply were not happy with the town of Fairfield because they felt like the town of Fairfield was just snubbing their nose at them and the letters they sent and asking them to comply. And so it took a little while for us to kind of work with FEMA and get them to trust that we wanted to comply with the law. We want to comply with the law. We're here to stand ready to do what you need us to do. Let's have a conversation. And with any federal agency, it takes a while. You go back and forth, back and forth. You ask a question, they answer it, they ask you questions, and bureaucracy at its best. So we did eventually establish what I believe was a good relationship. And it was the same thing with the Department of Environmental Protection when I first came in, and the EPA. They were pretty, and I'm going to say it plainly, as I usually do, pissed off with the town of Fairfield for not complying and not responding to notices of violation from them for contaminated soil and for all the things that happened in the town. And we had to work really, really hard to reestablish trust with these agencies so they had faith in the town of Fairfield that we were going to listen and follow the law. So this CRS situation, and Jim can expound a little bit more on this later on if you want to, but as we discussed at the Board of Finance meeting, it's a little bit more complicated than just reapplying. It doesn't work exactly that way. So once you're out of sort of compliance, then they don't just do a cursory review of our floodplain buildings. They start going through our building department and our zoning department and looking at permits, and then they start researching all the houses in the floodplain. And so if any of those houses are in violation with the floodplain, maybe they didn't fill in their basement, or maybe they did something on their property they weren't supposed to do. Those now are things that will retrograde us further. So it is, in my opinion, and it could take up to 3 years to get back into good standing. It's not a good place for the town of Fairfield to be in. Okay, so the proposal. Maintain the building. So this, we had broken this out a bit more from our August 31st meeting, where the actual funds go. So as we had discussed prior, $5 million to take out the soil from under the building with the building in place. It would be $4 million if we didn't have a building there, but the resolution that passed the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance is this proposal. And so it's $5 million to clean out the soil. And then the construction requirements to do that is to remove all the decking, all the walkways, all the everything around it so they could get under the building and start sucking the soil out. And then when we were in these discussions with FEMA and EPA and DEP, we're like, okay, well, we'll go under each bay, we'll clean it out, then we'll fix that gray beam, we'll hoist it up, we'll fix the gray beam, and then we'll go to the next bay and then the next bay, because it makes sense to do it all at once as opposed to at a separate time. So that's $3.5 million for the removal of those things to get under the building and then to put them back. And then into being in compliance with the actual FEMA NOV, which is the gray beam elevation. That is $3 million. And then, of course, we had put aside, if you recall, $1 million in ARPA funds to go toward all of this. How will we pay for it? So as you know, over the past 2 years, we have been diligent and responsible, and we've had a series of serious issues coming toward us with all the contaminated fill and with the Penfield well, we didn't know exactly about Penfield because it was an appeal, but we knew we had remediation issues. So we started putting money away, which, I'm glad we did that. So we have $15 million, and again, we have the $1 million in ARPA funds that we approved. And this has been asked a lot. Is there an option to recoup funds spent in the past? So we have, obviously explored all legal remedies. The investigation of the state's attorney's office is still active and ongoing. And FEMA has confirmed that in a January 3rd email that the town is not able to reclaim the $4.3 million in assistance that was available back when Sandy was, right after Sandy, because there was a fund for that. And the benefits, obviously, there are numerous benefits of the building. It has a lot of events in our town. 80% of the people who utilize that building for family functions are our residents who live in town. We have a concession stand. We have changing rooms, restrooms, park and rec and town events, father-daughter dances, comedy nights. The town itself uses it for a host of trainings and things of that nature. And we have a covered deck, which a lot of our residents enjoy, seniors most especially, who maybe can't walk on the beach, but like to sit by the beach and look at the water and just relax and read a book or have something to eat. The pavilion was appraised by an independent appraisal company in November of 2021 for $7.4 million. Okay, so this was asked a lot about resiliency efforts, and obviously my administration spent a lot of time meeting with the Flood and Erosion Board on many different items. This is something that's been ongoing for many years. I talked about this at the Board of Finance meeting when I was a state rep. I served on the Shoreline Task Force. There are a lot of resiliency things going on that, and the town has a study that was done how many years ago was it? The race study. It's about 3 or 4 years ago. So we agreed with the Flood and Erosion Board Control to put $100,000 into the overall package to be able to pick up that old study and revamp it and bring it up to date. And I think that's okay. What about the elevation? So to resolve the NOV, the natural grade must be restored to an elevation of 8 feet per the National Flood Insurance Program guidelines, and DEEP and FEMA have jurisdiction over the elevation of the beach. And during the Board of Finance meeting, we use this map at our offices when we're dealing with this, which is literally thousands of hours. Thousands of hours have been spent dealing with the contaminated soil and Penfield. It's actually stunning. But during our meetings, we had Eli in our engineering department go around, and the arrows on this map are pointing to areas along our shoreline that are at current elevation of 8 feet. And Penfield, if you see, is that little red dot sort of in the middle, right there. So that's Penfield, and it just shows you the other areas that are also at 8 feet, including Jackie Durrell and the Beach Club, which are on either side of Penfield Pavilion. Can the federal delegation help us? FEMA notified the town for the first time, as I said, about it during that phone call, and the town was alerted to the deadline. I actually immediately left that conference call when we finished up with FEMA and went into my office and called Congressman Hines on his cell phone and said, holy cow, they just said we have a deadline of March 31st. I don't, help me. And he was like, whoa, okay. So that's when we started to set up the meeting. On President's Day, we did a Zoom call with everybody, but I said, we have been working with them diligently to comply, and I still have to go through town bodies. It's not as if I could just pull this money out and start getting this done. And so we had good conversations. We had conversations with FEMA. They were on that call as well with the state delegation to bring them up to speed about everything. So Basically, Congressman Heim said to me, listen, I cannot change the regulations. Okay, they are what they are. But I can work with you to help with this, getting, if we get everybody on board, he said, we can help defray this downgrade if he sees that the town of Fairfield is willing to step up and comply with the law. And he would send a letter with Senator Blumenthal and Senator Murphy attached to our letter for reconsideration, which is drafted and ready to go should we have a positive outcome at tonight's meeting. And I have, just for the record, I have been in contact. We have been in contact with FEMA to let them know it has passed 2 of the 3 boards in town, and that we're hoping to be able to send that reconsideration letter before the March 31st deadline. And then that's just the resolution. I would assume you have a copy of it. And that's it, Mr. Moderator. I hope I wasn't quick as enough.
Well, it wasn't 5 minutes, but,
Oh, jeez, okay.
Thank you, Madam First Selectwoman. Just so everybody on the body knows who everybody is at the table, maybe do a quick introduction.
Yes.
Maybe use the mic. They can't hear you at home.
Sorry, I'm Tom Bremer. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer here at the Town of Fairfield.
Eli Gazal, Project Manager in the Engineering Department.
Jim Baldwin, Town Attorney.
Jim Wendt, Planning Director.
Greg Reusi, Bismarck Construction.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, I will turn it over to the body. Does anybody have any questions? Representative Gerber.
Good evening, Bill Gerber, District 2. May I, Tom, I'm just going to, and Greg, I guess, I'd like to recap to make sure that we know exactly what work is being planned. I just want to recap my understanding of what's going to get done. And it's, we're going to demolish the skirting around the building, demolish the decks and ramps, jack up the building, dewater the site while the building is jacked up, create cells under the building where we can, one cell at a time, vacuum out the contaminated fill. And then once that's done, we can dig down. We'll be digging down a little further. We'll be moving the sand and any remaining fill to get the beach to elevation 8, right? From the current 11 before this starts. While the building's jacked up, you'll cut away several feet of the wood pilings. Is that right? No, you don't need to cut any of the wood pilings?
I don't think we'll be jacking up the building either.
The building will be jacked up or it'll be supported, I guess, not jacked up. It'll be supported at the current height while you're working on the foundation.
That's correct.
So it won't go any higher. It'll be at the current height on
Correct.
supports. Okay.
Yep.
But you don't need to cut away wood pilings.
No.
Okay. So you'll keep the existing wood pilings, and what you're going to do when you dig down, you're going to build new concrete foundation with, I guess, steel.
We're going to be
steel
removing,
rebar.
I don't mean to cut you off.
No, I want you to.
We're going to be removing the grade beams that are the beams that connect the different pilings. So the grade beams will all be removed. They'll be
Before
cut,
you lay the new one.
or I'm not sure if it's going to be before or after.
Right,
We have
right.
But we're going to remove those grade beams, and we're going to reform new grade beams a few feet below where they are.
Right. And then, I assume that you're going to have to lay it first, connect the new grade beams that are lower to the existing columns and secure them, and then cut away and dispose of the old
Sure.
one. Then you'll rebuild the skirting, the decks, and the ramps, and then we'll be all set. Right? That's about it.
Hopefully.
Okay. So I forget your last name, sir, but Greg, is that all right?
But wait, before you move on, that's only on the main building. On the locker room, we're not going to be doing that because there are no grade beams under the locker room.
Right. So for the locker rooms, you don't need to do any of that, right? You don't need to do any of that for the locker rooms.
We just have to remove all the soil underneath the locker room building.
Oh, okay, okay. So I have a question, just a general question. How, for Greg, how risky do you think this work will be?
It's not that easy, and I think the soil makes it a little bit more complicated. I think we have to really segment how much we're doing at once, and I think one of my biggest fright is really the storm sequences that might happen along Highland Sound, so we have to have like plans in place for when we do the work. So every time you take all that into account, it just adds a little bit of a level of difficulty.
And just to add to that, just logistically speaking, for how we do this construction, we will not be exposing the entire building at one time. It will be done in bays. So it's very sequenced work. The building will not be exposed entirely at one time.
So that I know you're doing cells for the fill remediation, but for the grade beam laying down, that's the case as well.
That is correct, yep.
Right.
So in each bay, we remediate, redo the grade beams, backfill, move to the next bay. Remediate, do the grade beams, backfill, so on and so forth.
And watching Greg, your meeting with the Board of Finance, someone asked whether you had considered moving the building, and you gave an analogy of like knee surgery, that basically you wouldn't do that again because it's been done once, and you would not want to do that again.
Correct. The building's been moved once. You're going to do
Right.
it again.
So I'm wondering, this building's now 11 years old. I think it was built in 2012. I mean, the main hall was built in 2012. And then it was knocked off its foundation during Sandy, which is a stress. Right? It was moved to the parking lot, which is stress. It was moved back from the parking lot, and more stress. And I was just wondering, would it be fair to say that this building may be 11 years old, but has probably the body of a 30-year-old or something?
I wouldn't fully say that, because when they move the building back, they have a whole new framing system that supports the building. And I think that gives it a lot of stability and credit. And like I said before, it's not the building's fault. I think the building, the way it stands now, is in pretty good shape.
Okay, that's helpful. Is Anthony on the line? Or I just have a question about sort of feedback I've gotten that the roof's leaking, and there may be some sort of larger repairs that need to be done to the building after this amount of time. But not there. Oh, Anthony, question through you, Mr. Moderator, to Anthony Calabrese. The 11 years and a lot of wear and tear, and the roof has been, leaking. I know people that have been there during comedy night and got leaked on. So, how much repair work do you think it needs at this point? Sort of long-term maintenance kind of stuff.
I apologize. Anthony, Director of Parks and Recreation. I'm really struggling to hear anything that's happening in this room at the moment. But I believe I caught a leak. I think leak in the roof is what the question was revolving around.
Yes.
Again, I think it was pointed out that the building, is roughly 11 years old. It just really depends on the way that the wind blows right now. I know building maintenance, when the building was open, has been trying to address any kind of leak in the roof itself. So it's not coming from any of the flat parts of the roof. It really is just the ballroom. There's one specific area that they're trying to address. But I haven't talked to anybody sitting at the table there, when they're going to make any repairs to the building, if they're looking at that. So I can't really speak to it.
Okay, thanks. I have a question for Mr. Brammer and maybe for Greg. So, for the last rebuild of Penfield with, I think, Shawman Construction, we had, I've never heard the term before, but I now know what it is, a GMP contract. Is that what we plan on having for this project?
That's correct.
So we'll get back a bid from Bismarck that above which there will be no risk of going over that, or at least within normal parameters, but or no risk at all of going above that.
GMP does not guarantee no change orders. So as long as the GMP is written correctly and all the work is done within the scope of the GMP, then yes, the town would have no risk, and the risk would fall on Bismarck.
Thank you. So right now, the work, I know at the Board of Finance meeting, you were working off an evaluation of $7.4 million, and thank you, Mr. Bremer, for answering my question. It's actually come down quite a bit for Penfield Pavilion, a few hundred thousand, so it's about 7.1. And we thought we had 700,000 of cushion to not go over the 50/50 FEMA code upgrade rule, but it's now closer to 500,000. So what happens if the bid comes in, the GMP bid comes in at greater than 3.5 million for the horizontal grade beams, for the NOV work?
Well, right now, we have 3 million for the grade beams, not 3.5. We know the 50/50 rule kind of kicks in at 3.5 or above. I think that's the question. So, well, I'll ask our contractor who helped put those numbers together. How comfortable are you with the $3 million on the grade beams?
Comfortable.
But you haven't gone out to subcontractors. You're right, and this. So when you go out and bid to the subcontractors, you'll know, right?
Correct.
But so the question would be, if after you go out to bid and you come back, because 500,000. Look, anyone who's been on this body has seen things come in. Like recently, we saw something come in twice. You know, it was supposed to be 2 million. It's 6 million, so 3 times. So what happens if you come back? I guess this is for Mr. Bremer. If the actual GMP bid comes back at over 3.5 million.
Well, I think the short answer to that is I believe that the $3 million that we've included for that is not just one bid for one thing. There's builder's risks in there, there's contingencies and all that kind of stuff. I think the actual number is substantially lower than 3 million on what we expect the concrete, it's called concrete work, what the concrete work will be. So based on everything I've read or learned and listened to Greg going through these numbers, we're very confident that we'll be under the $3 million number. Now, if it comes in well above that number so that the 50/50 rule starts to come in play, then we're going to have to reassess what we're going to do, because we can't go forward. The position that the administration has taken is we're not going to go forward if we're going to be over the 50/50 rule.
Right.
That would be a real problem.
Right, okay. So, but if it's not, if you won't know from the GMP bid, if that's not all encompassing, you won't necessarily, you're saying there's other stuff that might come in later, right? Is that?
No, I think if I misspoke, I apologize. I think the $3 million number that we put in was for other things like builder's risk policy, insurance, and that sort of thing. So the actual cost of the actual removal is going to be substantial, in my opinion, will be substantially below $3 million. However, to get to your question, if in fact bids came in on the concrete portion far in excess of $3 million so that the 50/50 rule comes into play,
Right.
we're not going to go down that path. We're going to have to sit with FEMA and try to work something out so that we're not over the 50/50 rule, because if we are over the 50/50 rule, that's going to be a substantial problem for the town.
Okay, so my next question was going to be, have you priced that out? But I guess you'll do that when the time comes.
We can't, because we can't go out to bids because we don't have approval for the funding, and we have to wait for all the funding before we can get the plans in a final stage to enable us to do the bidding.
you're talking about raising it, the cost, I'm talking raising it a foot, and it would be raising it a foot, and also the windows would need to be replaced. Is there anything else if we hit that 50/50?
To be honest, we haven't done an exhaustive study of
Okay.
what are the impacts of the 50/50 rule, but I do know that that would be a problem.
Okay, great. And my next question, what you just touched on, was the builder's insurance. And
Point of order, Mr. Moderator, we have by Robert's rules 10 minutes, Mark, December 13, if you could please, for the speakers.
okay, I'll wrap it up for now. The insurance, last night at Board of Finance, you guys discussed that you have not been able to find anyone willing to insure this, and that you've gone out to 39 markets and no one's biting. Can you explain sort of what that is? And
Sure. In fact, our insurance broker, our local insurance broker, misspoke. The building is insurable. In fact, what we asked our local insurance broker to try to do is, we already have an insurance policy on the building if we go ahead with the building. That's out of California, and it's very expensive. So we asked the local broker to see if he could beat that number, in effect, with local insurers. And he had a quote that was much lower, I want to say 2 to 3 weeks ago, and he advised everyone last night that he had just been told last night that he no longer had that bid, that they withdrew the bid. But he's confident that he's going to be able to obtain another bid in the near future, and he's working on it as we speak.
Okay, and does that count towards the 50/50 rule?
No.
Cost of insurance, okay. Thank you. Yield the floor.
Thank you, Representative Gerber. Any other Representative Zesma?
Oops. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Liz Esmond, District 4, and through you, Mr. Moderator, to Greg, and I'm sorry, sir, that I did not write down your last name. So I have a couple of questions for you on your conceptual estimates. Can you tell us when you were engaged by the town of Fairfield, and if that was through an RFQ?
Yeah, there was an RFQ where we had an interview for CMs, and we were one of the 3, I think, that went in for interviews.
And can you tell us when that was, please?
I'm not really good with dates sitting here. I think First Selectman had mentioned the date.
Can you remind us, please?
It was in the third page, August of 2022, where I said RFQs were issued for construction manager, architects, structural and geotechnical, and coastal engineers.
Okay, thank you. And at that time, so just for the public's understanding, RFQ is a request for qualifications. At that time, were you given a construction timeline?
I was given the parameters of the project, and then we talked about, not particularly a timeline, we talked about the complexity of the project.
Not a start date, a proposed start date?
No.
There was a, the town did communicate with FEMA that we had a November target date, so that was not discussed with you, okay. And since we're only looking at one option here, I'm just curious why you were asked to propose 2 options.
After we got done talking to the engineers, you know, we investigated different plays with the building, what we could do. So the one option at hand we thought was best to fix it and leave it in place. And then the other option is pretty obvious of what was proposed.
Okay, and as far as contingency, what are you comfortable on a project like this in terms of allocating contingency, which I believe in your calculations is 10%?
Right, I think it's almost 11% that we have, and at
Okay.
this point we went through the CDs, and we felt pretty comfortable with the design method that was proposed.
And how many coastal projects of this type has Bismarck done?
Well, I could be honest with you, this is unique in itself, this project, you know, and if you add the contaminated fill, it makes it even that little bit more unique. I've done 2 schools in Black Rock Harbor along the coastline, and then Boca, Steel Point. That project was done over there. Now I'm building a new high school in Bridgeport at Seaside Park, and I'm in the middle of implementing a resiliency plan for the city of Bridgeport, so I have some familiarity with it. But most of the FEMA requirements are done by the professionals, and we implement and follow those rules to make sure they're satisfied.
Okay, and one more question. You do feel fairly confident when this work is bid for to subcontractors that these numbers should have no more than a 10% variance on the upside?
Yeah, feel pretty confident with the design that was proposed so far, talking to the different engineers, that the system that we have is doable. And the way we've taken into account the remediation that's required and the way we're going to vacuum and do bay by bay, we pretty much have it covered.
Okay, so but these numbers are about 6 months old at this point.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Zesma. Any other comments, questions from the body? Representative Vergara?
Mark, do you want to ask the WebEx people? I think they're having trouble hearing.
WebEx folks, how is the volume, the audio? Anybody? Bueller?
Bueller?
Can you hear me now? WebEx folks, can you hear us? Earth calling.
Yes.
Thank you.
Jill Vergara for District 7. So I wanted to go back to that insurance question because this is new information, and I didn't really understand your response because from my understanding, the broker was pretty sure last night and clear that this building is not, if there's a question whether this is going to be insured while it's under construction. He said there is a good, strong risk that it will be uninsurable while it's under construction.
Is that a question? Okay. So, as I said earlier, I just only tell you what he said today, which is he misspoke. He believes that it is insurable, and in point of fact, before he was even involved, we have been able to insure it at a much higher rate than we like, and that's why we asked him to try to get us a lower rate.
What is that higher rate?
$500,000.
And what is it typically?
$100,000 to $200,000.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Vergara. Representative McCabe, you had your hand up?
Representative McCabe, District 4. Greg, what's your last name?
Rayusi.
I know it's not easy.
Thank you. Mr. Riusi, through you, Mr. Moderator, you mentioned that one of your main concerns is about the storm sequence, and I'm somebody who likes to know the worst case scenario, and so I'm curious what would happen if during construction, during this work, such a thing blows in.
So we've kind of thought about that a little bit, and that's why we're only doing one bay at a time. And as we move in, we're going to have Plan A, Plan B, and we're dealing with contaminated soils, how we handle those, number one. Number two is we're going to have a pile of soil available, and with the storm monitoring that the weather that they tell us, I think gives us a good week heads up on what we have to do. So we have a plan that we've kind of proposed that we're going to have in place.
And if you don't mind, just giving us a little bit more information on what that plan looks like? And also, does that add to the cost of the remediation of the building?
Anything we do is related to cost, and the way we've developed the budget, we've put in some money in case, and really what it really comes down to, if we excavate 400 square feet of space to do our work, we're going to have enough soil to put back to kind of like stabilize the building as much as possible. And obviously with every storm there's a risk beyond my control, but we're going to take every precaution to hopefully satisfy the condition.
Thank you. And just one more question, I think. If this happens, again, I'm the worst case scenario person, would we be in danger of the 50-50 threshold that we're trying to avoid? What happens if sort of midway through, since we're going bay by bay, what happens if something happens and then all of a sudden it's going to cost more to do the project and it's going to push us into that danger zone? What will we do?
Well, the answer is pretty straightforward, and that is the mediation costs involved, to the extent that we need to do more mediation, where we bring in soil, that sort of thing. Those are not considered part of the 50-50 rule because they're not related to removing the gray beams.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative McCabe. Any other? Representative Bastilli.
Sharon Pastilli, District 3. Through you, Mr. Moderator, I have these comments and then questions for the administration. I'm not sure if they'd be for Madam First Selectwoman or for Mr. Bremer. I'm very concerned about the process that this has taken. We were first informed about the NOV in June of 2021. And then on August 31st, 2022, we had a joint Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and RTM meeting, and I just pulled a quote off of that presentation. It said, "We will be requesting approvals as early as next month and will provide necessary backup." And then the item did not appear on any agenda. On November 22nd, 2022, Mr. Bremer told FEMA in his letter to them that we are keeping our time schedule and expect to begin the project sometime in November 2022. And around the close of the letter, he said, "I expect to be presenting our funding request prior to the Thanksgiving holiday." After that point, this item did not appear on our agenda until it became an emergency just a few weeks ago. The delayed response has hamstrung the public's ability to weigh in on our options and has painted us into a corner. Could you explain the delay between us having the opportunity to vote as early as September and the emergency that we're now forced to deal with since February?
So thank you, Representative. As you know, on the meeting that I held for all three town bodies on August 31st, there were a tremendous amount of questions. We responded to all of those questions. There were more questions and lots of questions. And so it was very obvious to me by email, the amount of questions and phone call questions from elected officials, that people wanted a whole lot more information before they were going to vote on it. I've been involved in town government a long time. If you don't have the votes, you don't bring an item. If you can't get it done, then it's just a waste of everybody's time. So that's when we wanted to start working to get more information. And at that time, too, we still didn't have a full sign-off from FEMA on our plan. I mean, they liked it. We're going back and forth. But we didn't have an actual, sign-off. And what I said to Mr. Bremer was, I need a real sign-off from FEMA because people, elected officials, are going to ask, are they approving this plan? So we didn't get that until January. And then we wanted to schedule the town hall meeting, which I knew elected officials wanted. Well, FEMA didn't really want to do a town hall meeting. So that took time. And then we had our town hall meeting, but right before that, as you know, I thought we had more time. I wanted to start in November, but it just didn't work out that way. I mean, as anything in government, it doesn't always work out the way you want it to work out. but we had no idea about that March 31st deadline. Obviously, our hair would have been a bit more on fire.
Thank you, Madam First Selectwoman. Mr. Bremer, so then on November 2nd, what was the basis for telling FEMA that you were expecting to have funding and we were going to start construction by Thanksgiving? Because the item was not on any of our agendas, and by then the Board of Selectmen meeting would have been like the same week, because that's November 2nd, right? When's the next Board of Selectmen meeting? Within the week. And it did not appear anywhere, so I don't understand why we represented to FEMA that we were about to start construction when none of us knew about any of the plans. I don't know what happened at that point. Is it that like FEMA didn't say yes to what we had presented to them?
Again, we were still waiting for confirmation, complete confirmation on our schematic plans. We hadn't been going back and forth with FEMA on what things, I mean, all the questions we've been asked by residents, by elected officials, you know, could we have put the pavilion on a barge and brought it to Jennings? Could we put it in the parking lot? Could we do this? Could we do that? I mean, we went back and forth on a whole lot of things. We were really hoping we could get it done in November. That's why we held the meeting with all the 3 town bodies. That's why I wanted to do that joint meeting in August, because I was feeling the pressure. We were all feeling the pressure from FEMA. They wanted us to start moving. But it was very obvious, and we know how our elected officials are. We know what our town government's like. People got a lot of questions. They want everything, tons of information. Even when you give them a ton of information, that's not enough. They want more. So we were really hoping. We were getting pressured. So yes, Mr. Bremer said to them, we're hoping to get this done. We're going to get this done in an effort to try to get this done. But it was obvious there were a lot of questions from elected officials.
So where were we at with the plan on November 2nd, Mr. Bremer? Like, what plan did we have on November 2nd?
The plan that you're looking at now, we had submitted. We just hadn't gotten back confirmation from them. And I knew when we sat in our meetings, I said to Mr. Bremer, unless FEMA tells us that they like that and they're good with that, they don't seem to understand how our form of government works. You know, maybe they think I'm a mayor. It doesn't work this way. So I said, I need them to say, yes, that's the plan. We will let you go forward with that plan. And that happened in January.
Now FEMA sure does know what kind of government we have.
Oh, they sure do. You should have seen
Thank
the
you.
looks on their faces after that town hall meeting.
Thank you.
I mean, that Melissa woman came up to me and she said, you weren't kidding.
Thank you, Representative Basili. Representative Lambert?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tom Lambert, District 3. This question is for Mr. Bremer or Mr. Rayuski. Did I get that right? I think it might be the first one on the first try. So the question is, and it's building off of what Representative McKay was asking before, the once every 5-year, once every 10-year storm that happens to roll through during the construction process. Where is, in our contract with Bismarck, where's the risk allocated? Is it on the town or is it on Bismarck in the force majeure act of God situation that during the construction process there's some sort of damage that's imperiled the building to some degree?
That would be over and above the godlike act, above my contract, to the extent of damage that we can't fix.
So would any damage then that's incurred during the storm be part of a change order?
If the building's missing after the storm, I would think so.
And if part of the building was damaged during, the storm, for example, one of the bays or one of the cells that's being, worked on at the time?
I feel pretty confident that the cell work we're doing is going to be covered with one of my plans I might implement. It should be pretty well set. I would never leave it unprotected. New work.
Okay, so if a storm were to come in during construction, one of those bays is being worked on, you feel confident that it wouldn't be exposed to the elements of a storm that would damage the building?
No, like I had said, with the warnings that we have of storms in progress, I think we could pretty much mediate what we need to protect.
hypothetically speaking, there's damage that comes in a quick storm. Where's the risk allocated? Is that on you guys as part of the contract, or is the town going to be shouldering the burden of that?
It would be covered under the builder's risk insurance.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Lambert. All right, Jill, anybody else besides people that spoke already? Representative Siebert?
Joe Siebert, RTM District 5. I believe this question was probably answered, but through you, Mr. Moderator, to the first select woman. When I saw that sentence about from FEMA saying unless significant remediation progress is demonstrated, and we have a week to get back to them, do you feel confident after your conversations with them that this plan put forth is going to satisfy that definition?
Yeah, they signed off on
Okay.
our conceptual plan. I know it's confusing. It's the whole
Yeah.
thing is, but so Mr. Bremer and our engineers were all going back and forth, of course, with DEEP and EPA, but, can we do this? Can we do that? How about this? How about that? All this stuff. So when they finally settled on something, and then we sent it, and then they asked for more information, then we went back.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they like the plan that's here, this one. And it's very detailed, and Eli can speak more in depth because he knows more about it. What they mean by significant progress is they want, basically they're saying, don't send us a reconsideration letter that you don't have the funding to pull the trigger on the plan. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh yes, here I am, I have the money, I'm going to go start fixing the building. That's what they want.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Siebert. Representative Parham?
Cindy Parham, District 2. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the First Select Woman. Since we had to close down the rentals at the end of October, what were the lost revenues from then until the end of March? Was it over 100,000? Was it something that Anthony can?
I think Anthony could better answer that. We were hoping that we were going to be able to, get this thing done. And it was, obviously it was a guest and we were hoping to get it done. And we didn't want to have people's weddings planned and then like, oh, we have the approvals, we're ready to go. FEMA agrees with our plan and now we have to tell people they can't have their wedding. So we figured, believe me, we agonized over it. And then we decided, let's just not take any more. So Anthony, do you want to answer what we may have lost? Representative asked from, did you say October through March?
Well, November 1st through
November
this
1st.
month.
It's really a loaded question. We take reservations 2 years in advance. So when we decided not to take reservations, obviously we weren't taking any reservations, and we only had to refund a few after that, the November 1st date. And that's why that date was chosen. Typically, November through March is really our off season or our slow season. So maybe a dozen parties at most. Again, we make a bulk of our money between April and September. That's the wedding season.
Okay, I understand. So some of the community groups were let down. They couldn't have their community functions.
Do you know how many people were like, did anyone come to you and request like a special dispensation where they can have the event, knowing that nothing was happening to the building?
We did work with a few that tried to move parties up or events up. But no, in most cases, there wasn't much wiggle room to move anybody anywhere else. So if we were able to move them to Jackie Durrell, we did.
Okay.
For Mansion was obviously another option, but again, it's completely different, setting and vibe. So yeah, I mean, there were a lot of unhappy people, and we get the angry calls literally every day. People calling that still don't realize the building's closed.
But my last question is, since we knew nothing was really going to happen like month to month, we couldn't really get any of those in for extra revenue? There was really no way to get that done?
No, definitely you're not going to get the weddings. Like I said, most of the weddings are booked a year to 2 years in advance. You could always pick up, a last minute retirement party or a birthday party or, a smaller function at town meeting, things of that nature. But the large scale events that take planning, we wouldn't be able to do.
Okay, so there were disappointed residents, and we didn't really get to accommodate any of them, even though the pavilion was ready to go for that last minute party or that meeting. But all right, I'm done.
Yeah, I think to your point, and to the first selectwoman's point, if somebody had something on the books and then was getting canceled last second, that's not really fair to them either. I mean, if you spent thousands of dollars on your wedding, I don't think you wanted it canceled.
Thank you, Representative Parham. Representative Vergara, unless somebody else who hasn't spoken yet. There's nobody in the chat, right?
Jill Vergara for District 7. I wanted to revisit Representative Pistilli's question regarding the inaction from August 2022 to February 2023. Our first selectwoman indicated that the delay was due to needing to respond to the August questions. I rewatched the August meeting in full, and there weren't a lot of significant questions. I was one of the people who actually asked one question. I wanted one question answered, the cost differential between the remediation if a building was there and a building was not there. I think Craig Curley asked some questions about the FEMA reimbursement. To my understanding and to my knowledge, we didn't receive any answers until the February town hall, and that was when it was unveiled in your presentation. I never received a response to my question, my one question, until that presentation was put before us at the town hall, delineating the differences between the remediation with a building there and a building not there. So I don't think it's fair to say that delay was due to questions that were left unanswered until February. In addition, to my knowledge, the one question that was answered was a request that documents be given from FEMA, because there was a concern by Selectwoman Lefkowitz that she was not fully understanding what the communications were between FEMA and the administration and what the plan was. And those documents were not provided. She asked for them in September, and they weren't provided until the end of December because Representative Zezima realized that was never fulfilled either. Along the course of that email chain, I had asked for the notice of violation because it's very confusing. It's a very confusing backup history, and there's no one place where it says this is the notice of violation. That also was never specifically provided to me, so I had to pick through the documents and try to figure out what exactly was the notice of violation. And there are actually two, and it was November 28, 2018.
So to clarify for you and everyone else, there were quite a few questions actually on the night of August 31st. Mr. Stark asked questions, Ms. Zezima asked questions, quite a few people asked questions. We did assemble questions. We sent a very detailed email on August 31st with a lot of attachments, a lot of information, and we asked everybody, do you have any more questions? And we really didn't get that many, if at all, any replies. But then we started getting emails, well, I want this, phone calls, I want this, I want that, I want this. Again, I've been involved a long time. I know how this goes. I know that, and we have supplied so much documents. I mean, from the minute I've come in here and all the information I have shared between the fill pile and Penfield, every single thing we have, we are actually working every day on many other issues in town. We had a global pandemic. There are so many things going on in town. We get emails, sometimes even from you, with maybe 25 questions detailed questions.
I'm
I mean,
sorry,
but
I've never
could-
done
it
that,
could
excuse
take-
me.
It could take a considerable amount of time to respond to these very detailed questions and phone calls. So if your question is, if you're asking if we just delayed it because, I don't know, we didn't feel like bringing it forward, or was it because we were getting a whole lot of questions and we realized that elected officials would want more information before having an item of this significance put before them for a vote?
I not privy to any sort of question that was put to you that was answered in that time frame.
We have a lot of elected officials. You're not the only one.
And I mean, it should be provided to all of us, that answer, because we were all in that public forum and we were all going to be voting on this
So the
item.
August 31st, you're confusing. Things happen after August 31st. I sent an email on September 2nd with a whole bunch of information. A week later, phone calls for information, emails for information, lots of requests for more information. So flood and erosion people wanted more information. There was a lot of information that people wanted, and we wanted to make sure we could assemble everything and have the answers to people's questions before we brought an item before the town bodies.
Is flood and erosion elected?
I know, but they're an important board.
You keep blaming this on elected
I'm
officials.
not blaming, blaming what, Jill?
The delay.
Blaming what?
The delay and some sort of obstruction.
Thank you, Representative Vergara. Representative Wackerman.
Karen Wackerman, District 7. I hadn't heard that FEMA has approved these plans. Do you have that in writing from FEMA? That would be good to know, but, you know, since we went through this before where apparently plans were not followed, do we have that in writing?
Do you want to answer this? Apparently no regulating agencies put things in writing. I don't know why, but they don't. They looked at our plans, they said they agree with this plan to remedy the notice of violation, but even the EPA, in the DEP, they say what's the language they use?
I can't remember the language, but the issue is for getting things in writing. They're not going to issue anything in writing until they have detailed design plans submitted to them so that they know exactly what we're doing. Based on the conceptual plans and the schematics that we've already sent to FEMA, we've gotten the thumbs up. They're very comfortable with that. And I should also add that we've gone through a lot of different scenarios with FEMA, but we've kind of centered on this one scenario because this is the one that was most acceptable to them and to us. So until the actual design plans are all done, I'm not expecting to get anything from them in writing before we begin.
Thanks. And you definitely won't start work until you have it in writing that they approve everything, right?
That's correct.
For both DEEP and as well as FEMA.
As much as we can get in writing, that's right. We don't want to go forward and be here again with a problem. I want to remove that possibility to the extent that we can.
Okay, thank you.
And just to be clear, Representative, all through this process, LEPs have been watching every single thing we're doing as far as cleaning and remediating of the soil. So it's not as if we're doing it without oversight, a lot of oversight. And the same thing will be true here. So that's why when we were talking to Bismarck, they were saying they probably wouldn't be able to start until October because we'll have to finalize, get everything done, and then the sign off from FEMA. I want FEMA on site. If they come every week, that would be great. Because I want to make sure everything is above board and perfect, and none of us ever have to talk about this ever again.
Thank you, Representative Wackerman. Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. I've lived in this town for 32 years in a non-compliant house. I lived through 2 superstorms, 1972 and Sandy. I did an addition with a 50-50 restriction, so I know the extreme difficulty of staying within that 50-50, and there's really no leeway for going over. Going over could cost the town well over $5 million additional dollars. So I really think that we need more time. And for these reasons, I'd like to make a motion to amend item 2 on the warning and amend the full resolution contained in the backup for the special meeting of the town of Fairfield on Thursday, March 23rd, 2023, entitled a resolution appropriating $10.6 million for the costs related to the construction, remediation, and addressing the notice of violation at Penfield Pavilion. A resolution appropriating $5.1 million for costs related to the remediation and addressing the notice of violation at Penfield Pavilion. Whereas the total cost for the remediation at Penfield Pavilion, as well as the cost to address the FEMA notices of violation, is $6.1 million, the total costs. And whereas the town previously allocated and approved $1 million in American Rescue Plan Act funding to be applied towards the total costs, and whereas the town is holding the funds in its capital non-recurring fill pile remediation account, and desires to appropriate $5.1 million of the funds to finance the balance of the total costs. And now, therefore, be it resolved, as recommended by the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, the town hereby appropriates the following sums from the capital non-recurring account for the following purposes: $3 million related to remediation at Penfield Pavilion, $2 million related to work to address the FEMA notices of violation, and $100,000 to fund the hiring of a coastal engineering firm to study and update the previous resiliency study pertaining to Penfield Pavilion. Thank you.
Do I have a second for that amendment? Representative Vergara.
Mr. Moderator, I know there were questions from representatives regarding the scope of change of what would happen if the scope of change. I think the Attorney Baldwin should speak to that for the body.
He certainly can. The email was sent out to the entire RTM. I don't know if they got a chance to read it.
Thank you. If I understand the proposed amendment, it would definitely change the scope of this project. It's not clear to me whether you're proposing to demolish the building and remove the grade beams completely, if I may ask through you, Mr. Moderator. Is that the question? Is that the plan?
Representative Georgiadis.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Baldwin, no, it's not that I am trying to get the building knocked down. I just think we need more time to gather more information to make sure that the funding is accurate and that we aren't going to go over the 50-50. Since no construction is scheduled to start till October, this resolution buys us time, allocates money so that we can move ahead with the 2 things most important to the town, which is to remove the contaminated fill and to do work to make sure that we don't go into retrograde and lose our 10% discount, while at the same time allocating enough money so that we can go out to bid, make sure that our, I know Bismarck has given us a bid, but to make sure that the finances, the backup, are more accurate. And if you want more money, we can give it in next month. So as long as we have more additional information, financial information.
If I may, if it's okay, what about fixing the grade beams?
That's in the proposal.
So you fixed the grade beams with the building still in place? I'm not sure. I think that's a question for
This
Greg.
is a funding. This is all about funding.
I'm not sure that that's going to satisfy FEMA. Or
Maybe they'll give you the thumbs up again.
It's not really a plan. It's half a plan. And as I understand it, and I have been part of those discussions, they need a plan, a final plan. And giving them half a plan First of all, I don't even know if it's feasible. I defer to Bismarck on that, whether you can fix the grade beams while the building's there without essentially accomplishing everything which is supposed to be this plan that's before you. I question whether that's even possible.
Given that we've had 30 days, I feel my amendment is to allocate enough money to move forward, satisfy FEMA, satisfy the remediation, and then once we gather more information, we can appropriate more money. We have the money, we know we do, and so that's what my amendment is about: more information and more time and money when we have the information.
Greg, would you?
I'm trying to understand the question, but I can't remediate and not do the grade beams. It all has to be done simultaneously.
It's not a question, it's an amendment.
Right, just to clarify though, very clearly, the town has spent thousands of hours working with a federal agency on the plan that is before you. Not some conceptual plan, this plan. FEMA said to everybody who came to the meeting very clearly, if we do not have a funding mechanism in place for the plan that they want, the retrograde starts. That's it. I mean, there is no more remediation. There is no mediation anymore with FEMA. FEMA sent a letter to the town of Fairfield years ago saying that we were building the building out of compliance. They have lost their patience with the town of Fairfield. They want us to follow the law. And to my point earlier, when I was asked, why did you delay it? I'm hearing somebody wants more information. And this is what I was talking about. More information, more information, more information, while we have a federal agency telling us we are violating the law. So I don't know how we can be any more clear. This is thousands of hours of work with a federal agency, our engineering department, construction people, all these people, to come up with this plan that FEMA said yes to, not some conceptual plan. So frankly, what this amendment will do is basically say, we're not complying, FEMA. Start the retrograde.
Just to add, procedurally, if this amendment were to pass, it would then go back to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance for their consideration, and who knows what that's going to do. And certainly it does put into jeopardy the compliance issue.
Thank you. Are there any comments on the amendment? Representative Astorita.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ken Astorita, District 10. As I think I've maybe have mentioned at a previous appearance at this lectern, part of the reason that I ran for this body was because of this issue. I've heard a lot of great questions tonight, really good, informative, substantive questions. And I can't help but wonder if this body had asked some of those questions back in 2012, 2013, perhaps we wouldn't be sitting here having to do this right now. I mean, for me personally, Penfield Pavilion has become the confluence of criminality and staggering negligence. And I tell this body, in my opinion, it is time to make a decision and move forward. I, for one, am willing to vote to approve the plan that the First Select Woman and her team have put forward, because in my opinion, that is what is in the benefit of this entire town. I know not everybody uses Penfield Pavilion, but a lot of people do. And I think it's an asset that this town cannot afford to lose. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Astorita. Representative Iacona, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Through you to the sponsor of the amendment, it's unclear to me what information you require in order to take action tonight. What has not been given to you that's not clear enough that we are not able to make a decision on the financials that have been verified by the professionals and approved by the actual finance board in town. So specifically, what is it that you're looking for in order to be able to take action and consider withdrawing this amendment that's going to put people's flood insurance at risk?
Georgiades District 9. I proposed the amendment because the timeline was extremely short. I proposed the amendment because the estimates are estimates. There are no parameters. I feel as if the contingency is below what it needs to be, and so I'm looking for more information than I found, and that's why I proposed my amendment. Thank you.
You could read this copy. I mean, basically, Representative Georgiades is looking to reduce the funding down to $6.1 million, which includes the $1 million of ARPA money. So 5.1 from the 10.6. Does that help? I don't know what our 30 days was referring to. Representative Barahona. Thank you. Representative Gerber.
Bill Gerber, District 2. It wasn't really until I started pulling the numbers together from the various presentations and putting them side by side in different options that, and also trying to lay out the risks and benefits of each one next to each other, that I realized that there's not, I mean, now, and I just added the additional insurance costs that Mr. Bremer just told us about tonight, $500,000 versus normally $2,000, that $200,000, that the difference between what we're proposing here for a 11-year-old building that was moved to the, that was hurt during Sandy, moved to the parking lot, moved back, can't be moved again because there's stress on it, has a leaky roof, and it's 11 years old. The difference between that and actually demolishing the building and building a new one is about $3 million, based on what you've provided us in the past for building a new building. And I struggle with the risks the same way I think Representative Georgiades does. There's a lot of risk in what we're proposing here. I don't know that anything bad's going to happen, but when you look at something like this and you look at what insurers are saying, who are pretty good at this stuff, you've got to handicap, what the cost is going to be on this. I think it's not a bad idea to go to FEMA, because we could go to FEMA and remediation would be to tear it down, right? I mean, that is possible, right? So FEMA would agree to tearing the building down, but I think what Representative Georgiades is saying, that we should go to FEMA and say, as of now, we've just approved to tear it down, but we're going to go out and we're going to get bids. We're going to get a solid bid from subcontractors. Greg is going to go do that, and we're going to come back and we're going to get approved something else, and if we can't, we're going to tear it down. But if we tear it down, we can build something new at age 0 instead of age 11, or in my view, probably age 20 or 30, based on what this building's been through. And it's going to cost $3 million more. So, you know, I don't think this is have Penfield or not. There's a lot of variables here. There's a lot of more unknowns about what Bismarck is describing. It's very, very tricky business, very risky business, and it could trigger significant costs, and we're going to end up with an 11-year-old building that's been stressed even more through this process, as opposed to spend $3 million more and have a new building. I mean, the pilings are already in, which is based on the appraisal, is a huge part of the cost. So we're talking about laying the foundation and building a new building. So either way, we could have a pavilion here, and we could have a better pavilion. So that's sort of where I'm coming at. I wouldn't want to move forward with this. I would be willing to move forward in a temporary measure and then ask FEMA to let us come back if we pass additional monies. Let us come back later and hopefully have it as a decision tree, and maybe even have a referendum on this so we actually know how the people feel and it's not an interpretation of some elected officials or a small number of people who are interested enough to get back to us. Really know what the town really wants. Personally, I would like to have a pavilion there, but I'd like to have a really good pavilion there, and I'd really like this not to blow up, because I think it's a really, really risky proposition. Thank you. I do have a handout if anyone wants it, but I've put these options side by side, and I've laid out, excluding the insurance risk, which I didn't really know about, laid out what I see the risks under each one, and if anyone's interested, I mean, I'd love to get it into the minutes. Can I get this in the minutes? Ann, can I get this in the minutes?
Thank you, Representative Gerber. Representative McCormick?
So, Mr. Moderator, if I could just respond, I think what Mr. Gerber is suggesting is that we relitigate Penfield Pavilion again. The town has been talking about Penfield Pavilion since 2006. This whole town talked about Penfield Pavilion more than I think anything else has been talked about besides the 2 high schools in this town. And what I hear him saying, and maybe I'm wrong, is that he wants us to tear the building down and talk about it again, go through all the building committees, the meetings. It is not going to cost $3 million to build a brand new pavilion. We have, I don't know, somewhere in the area of $400 million worth of capital projects on our capital waterfall. I don't know what exactly. We will be in retrograde, just so we're all real clear, on March 31st. That is and Mr. Wendt explained this at Board of Finance meeting and the Board of Selectmen meeting. That's approximately a 3-year process. Pretty much everyone in the flood area who lives in the floodplain area will be scrutinized. And I don't know if we'll ever get out of retrograde after that process. But this sounds like, to be very clear, this administration has spent thousands of hours trying to comply with an NOV. There are other things happening in our town, a considerable amount of other things. And to say that we're going to do this again for another, I mean, how many years did it take last time? Mr. Walsh may remember. He's an ex officio member of this board. He was around. He voted on Penfield twice. I mean, 3 times, sorry, 3 times.
You were directing to Representative Gerber, right, Madam First Selectwoman? The issue? So.
I just want to make clear that I wasn't saying it would cost $3 million. I was saying that based on the numbers we got earlier, that it would be 11.5 to do what we're doing now, and it would be about 15 to do to build a new building. So it would be, I think, an increment of about 3.
So to
What-
be
what-
in compliance to try to be in compliance, as Mr. Baldwin said, we would have to bring the item back to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance, which essentially is demolishing the building.
Right.
Because we won't have the money. I'm pretty sure those boards will vote no because they voted for this plan.
Well, they might be willing to vote yes if there's a promise on your part to first go to FEMA and see if we can get, a more solid bid and plan from the construction manager and maybe even get our GMP bid. I would like to remind everyone that when we went out to bid for Shawmut Construction, it wasn't enough when it came back, and we had to go through the process and get more money to actually fulfill that bid. So we don't need necessarily to have the whole thing approved for Bismarck to go out to bid with their subcontractors and come back with the GMP.
So the way that our town government works, you actually have to have a funding approval before you can go out to those bids. You have to have approval. You can't just, construction companies don't bid on fantasies. They bid on, oh, yes, these town bodies approve this. I mean, you know how this works. They're not going to bid on something that's not real.
Okay. Then I would suggest, going ahead, giving FEMA the plan to demolish, and then let them get us out of retrograde, go back later and either ask them to allow us to come back later and change, or we'll end up building a new building for probably $3 million more than we would with this plan and get a new building.
So you're asking the town bodies to demolish a building we are still paying $8 million of debt service on, that's worth over $7 million, to then go back and have relitigate it for a fourth time, and potentially, how many years? I can't even imagine. Look at the history of the years that it took to build that building. Years. And then we're going to, who knows what it would cost then. And I'm quite sure our community would be wanting the other items on our capital waterfall to be addressed. There's school needs. We have wastewater treatment projects. We have, I mean, you all know what the capital project list looks like. It's not a secret. It's a significant amount of money. And when we're all spending a lot of time working on those.
I understand all that. I'm looking
And
at this
frankly,
as
demolishing
analytic.
a
I'm looking at
building
this
is
as
a big
analytically
deal.
as I possibly can.
I know, but
I know it's a-
demolishing the
I know it's
building
a
is a
big deal.
really big deal.
I know it's a
you're
really big
demolishing
deal,
a
but
building
it's not a
that is
psychological.
perfectly fine.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make this a psychological, big deal or not big deal. I'm trying to look at it analytically. Having $8 million of debt on this building actually means nothing if you look at the numbers, how much the building's generating. This is not, there's no connection between debt, already spent and what we should do going forward. I think anyone who says that is maybe doesn't have a great grasp of finance. We need to look at what this generates going forward and the best way to have this building generate revenue going forward. If you look at the P&L, if whatever money you spend doing what you're doing to dig underneath and replace the grade beams, there's a cost of funds to that. So, we could have seen a P&L to actually understand what this all means, but my sense is from trying to put things together myself that that the debt we have is lost debt. So we should be looking at going forward, what's the best thing for the town? And I think this is so risky that there's a really good chance that when you start this, we're going to come back and we're going to look. There's too high a probability that we're going to look silly in the future and not have been careful. So that's what I'm worried about. I'm trying to handicap that and say, well, we can probably build a new building and it would be a hell of a lot risky and probably could get insurance during that too.
So I just would say, again, I hope everyone's taking into consideration what that proposal is, to tear down. And I'm sorry, no, I'm not a finance expert, but the town of Fairfield's taxpayers are paying $8 million of debt for a building that's there. We're paying it. That's real money. It's $8 million. It's like buying a house for $1 million and then knocking it down and continue to pay the mortgage on it. It simply doesn't make sense to me.
Representative McCormick.
Karen McCormick, District 2. I am shocked that we have people coming to the microphone tonight and using words like probably several times in their sentence. We have a lot of probablys. But we have experts here that have described this building as perfectly fine the way it is. There's no concern about the age of the building. There doesn't seem to be a concern about the fact that the building has been moved already, given where it currently is located. I can't understand for the life of me how we can risk going into retrograde and what that means for the town residents, the 1,800 town residents that have federal flood insurance. And then we have additional residents that actually have private flood insurance, and this is also going to affect them. You do not play with fire when you're dealing with a federal agency. And I believe that we are playing with fire. We don't have the ability or the bargaining power to sit down with FEMA and tell them how we're going to fix a problem that was criminally created by Michael Tetro's administration. The suggestion that we can build a building for just $3 million more, when it's probably going to take us, I'll use the word probably, years to get to the point where we can get those approvals. We all know where inflation is. We know, as we sit here today, what these numbers are going to look like. The $3 million suggestion or guess, to me, is just irresponsible. We have the residents of Fairfield who have spoken. They've sent emails in. They overwhelmingly support rebuilding and dealing with this issue right now. I'm a lifelong resident. I've grown up looking at Penfield, driving by Penfield. It's, as Mr. Walsh said in the Board of Finance meeting, this is an iconic location for our town. When you see real estate brochures or marketing brochures for the town of Fairfield, Penfield Pavilion is right there front and center, along with some other iconic locations. I think it's extremely irresponsible to suggest that we demolish this building and play with fire with FEMA. Come March 31st, which I believe is next Thursday, we are officially in retrograde with FEMA. And there's no going to FEMA and making a phone call tomorrow morning and saying, what about if our plan is to knock it down? Will you accept that? That's not how the federal government works. It doesn't work with a phone call and with 6 days' notice saying, you know, help us out here. They're clearly done with their patience level with the town of Fairfield. And we know why. I think it's very clear why. So I think it's irresponsible to suggest that we start amending what's already been approved by two bodies of this town government, one of which is charged with analyzing finances much more deeply than we are, and they're clearly in a much better position to do that as the Board of Finance. I think it's irresponsible to second guess what they've already analyzed, and to suggest that we know better than they do is, in my opinion, just mind-boggling that we would do that. So for all those reasons, I would not support an amendment. I think we're playing with fire with our town flood insurance premiums for 1,800 residents plus, and I think it's irresponsible to even suggest that that should be a course of action that we pursue.
Thank you, Representative McCormick. Representative Barahona.
Representative Barahona, District 5. To suggest that we're being irresponsible by asking questions, I think, is disingenuous, especially when Representative Asteritas got up here a little while ago and said the opposite, that if we had done what we were doing tonight 10 years ago, we wouldn't be in the situation we are. So to be making this kind of decision with such little time and information, even though I've been hearing that there's been months of questions being asked, this body did not get this information until last week. And so my question is about public input into this process, because the emails that I received were not overwhelmingly in support of rebuilding this pavilion. And with all due respect, maybe it was litigated in 2006, but I didn't live here then. And I'm just as much of a Fairfield resident as anyone, even though I've only been here 11 years. I have sent out to my constituents and have had a lot of people very torn on this issue. And that while they love the pavilion, they also don't love the idea of dumping another $12 million into it. And so my question is, was there ever a thought from the town, a serious consideration of doing a referendum to the town to see if they wanted to do this? Yeah, I'm sorry, First Selectman, yes.
The way our referendum system works per our charter is that something actually has to pass through all three bodies, and then a referendum petition has to be pulled from the town clerk's office. A certain amount of signatures have to be obtained and filed back with the town clerk, and then that sets a referendum process in place. Our government is not a referendum government. I know some are, like Monroe.
Yeah.
They have tons of referendums on their budgets. That's not our form of government.
But we could have in the fall perhaps gone through that process and done a ballot question of some kind, or is that not possible?
I don't really know how ballot questions, we don't typically do that in our town. But I don't ever, not on a funding item.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Barahona. Representative Zesma.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Liz Esmer, District 4. So I just want the public and those present to understand the Board of Finance vote. It was not unanimous. The two no votes were not only from the chair, who's a former partner at Deloitte & Touche, but Craig Curley, who is the second most qualified financial person on that board. Their questions, their concerns, their doubts, their hesitation was well established at that meeting. I'm not voting on anything because the body before me did it. I don't care if it was my party or not. Asking questions is our job. And if that's annoying anyone, I can get voted out of office. But I'm not going to spend upwards of $11 million of my constituents and the entire town's taxpayer money without asking questions. Some questions we shouldn't have even had to ask. We should have had the information. It should have been in the public realm. When we suggested in August that we put this before the public, we were told no. We know what the public wants. Well, obviously we don't. So I would just like to clarify that in the case of potential demolition, an option that we were never given, we should have had more than one option. Mr. Moderator, through you to Anthony Calabrese, I hear a lot about how sound, structurally sound, nothing is wrong with this building. Can you explain to me, at the age this building is now, why is the roof leaking? What was the warranty on it? And what are we doing about it?
Anthony Calabrese, Director of Parks and Recreation. I would have to defer to building maintenance on that. I don't have an answer for you.
Can you get that information for us, please?
I'm sure someone can track it down for you.
I appreciate it. And as to the point of order called earlier, it was actually stated out loud at the town hall meeting with FEMA that the reason there wasn't a vote on this issue prior to now was, and I'm going to paraphrase, because the votes weren't there. That is not how we do things. I will speak for my caucus. There was absolutely no way that we could be accused of suggesting that we did not welcome a vote. We weren't even given an opportunity. It took from September 1st to the middle end of December, and I was the one who spearheaded after First Selectwoman Lefkowitz to get the information. Well, the amendment is giving us an option that we should have had before. So, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Ed. You're on my bad eyesight. I'm sorry.
Ed Bates in District 1. This has gotten so confusing. Several months ago, when all this started to happen, I got to say this is my third or fourth vote on Penfield. When I found out why, the fill pile, and what was done, my first instinct was to burn the building down because I was so mad. Thinking about this over the past several months, and to Representative Pistilli's point, one of the reasons maybe this got held up is because when I found out the numbers on this, there was 2 phone calls I made. I called Iacono and I called Kupchak, and I said, you guys are crazy. $11 million when these numbers started coming out. I said, how could this happen? How could we be stuck footing the bill on this? And as I started to pay attention and all this stuff started to happen, I own my own business. And several times in my life, I've had the pleasure of sitting across the table from regulatory agencies and tax authorities. And one thing I've learned, you're not going to win. You just aren't. So, I'm not happy about any of this. When I hear this amendment, one of the options, if we go through with this amendment and support this amendment, it looks like we might have to tear the building down. Honestly, folks, I don't think that's in the best interest of the town. I hate the dollars associated with this. But genuinely, when we're all long gone, this building is still going to be here. It's not about us right now. It's about the future of the town of Fairfield. I mean, you could sit back and look at 1970 when we tried to build Smith Richardson. I'm sure that was a battle. But here it is. We have that. We'll have this when we're long gone. We need to fund this thing. I don't want to hold it up. I thought about, in thinking about this amendment, I'm like, if we go backwards on this and bring up this argument of do we want Penfield, I'm telling you right now, I really think the answer is yes. I think it's an overwhelming yes. So my gut is, I'm going to bet on that and say, let's go forward. Now, to address people's concern about the financial risk in this, from what my saying is, I got the expert down at the end of the table. This is who I'm relying on. It's going to cost this, $3 million. If he's wrong, then I go to Bremer's scenario, which then we're over the 50-50, we're at DEFCON 1. Then we can start all over. If you want to start that conversation, do we need Penfield? Is it going to cost us $10 million? Is it going to cost us $20 million? That's the time for that argument, not tonight. So, please, vote no on the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bateson. We do know how much he hates spending money, so that was really from the heart. Representative Horton, unless Representative Georgiadis, are you going to withdraw your amendment, or you have something else to say? Thank you, Representative Horton.
Thank you. Margaret Horton, District 9. I just wanted to follow up on Representative Barahona's question through you, Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Bremer. You had said earlier that this was the plan most acceptable to FEMA and most acceptable to us. And so by us, I assume you mean the town. So can you speak a little bit more about the formal process that was used to gather public feedback between the second denial by FEMA and the town hall on February 23rd?
So when you're saying public feedback, so just so you're clear, we were negotiating with a regulating agency. It wasn't a public
Yes, I'm
meeting.
clear on that.
So back and forth, would you accept this? Would you accept that? So it wasn't like we were going to bring in the whole town of Fairfield to have meetings with FEMA.
Why wouldn't you be, through you, Mr. Moderator, why wouldn't you be bringing in the whole town of Fairfield to understand what residents wanted to do about this notice of violation?
Because Penfield Pavilion has been litigated 3 times, townwide, thousands of hours of meetings, building committees, public forums. Holy cow, was there a lot of meetings.
Correct.
So the bottom line is, this administration was responding to a notice of violation. That's it.
Yes, and I understand that the building had been
And the notice of
previously
violation was that
litigated.
the grade beams were not at the proper elevation. It wasn't, the building needs to be rebuilt, the building needs to be built smaller. It wasn't that. It was, the building needs to come down a couple feet. That's it.
Correct. I understand what you're saying. What I'm asking is, given that some of the input we received from residents is that their feelings about the building changed in understanding both the impact of the fill pile and the grade beam issue, I'm curious what formal process was used to seek resident feedback to understand how we should deal with this FEMA issue.
So when I sent out the email to all the elected officials after the August 31st to explain what we were doing, what the bottom line was, what we were going toward, what we felt was the most common sense approach, we included in that all the newsletters that I talked about Penfield. It was a lot of newsletters. 26,000 people are signed up for that newsletter. We have a representative democracy in the town of Fairfield. We're elected officials. You're elected, I'm elected. We represent people.
I'm
That's
aware
how
of how
that-
our government
that's how
works.
that
I'm
works.
wondering if
So-
there was a more formal process, focus groups, town hall meetings, things like that to seek resident
and that
feedback.
was all done 3 separate times on Penfield. And I was here watching it the whole time. And this is what they chose. This is what, that building is what our town chose. That building.
Okay, so that's a no, that there was no formal process between the notice of violation and the town hall about this particular remediating
No,
the issue of FEMA.
we were negotiating the NOV. Period, that's all.
Thank you, Representative Horton. Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. I just want to clarify the intention of my amendment. My amendment is to buy time by approving the money for the remediation and for approving money to address the NOV. Also, I want to remind everybody, FEMA is insurance for flooding, and as a 32-year resident who has lived through 2 superstorms, flooding is the major issue. Yes, insurance is important if that happens, but a delay would also allow the town, definitely, not probably, to determine whether there are any flood control implications for this option and for the town to consider. So that is me being incredibly responsible by buying us time and making sure that we have a choice and what works best for the people in my district, District 9. Thank you.
Representative Durrell had his hand up prior to you, Representative Steele.
Okay, here we go. All right, Alex Durrell, RTM 3. Thank you for the privilege of your time. Mainly due to the shameful actions, or more accurately, indifferent inactions of the previous administration, Fairfield is unfortunately not FEMA's friend now or in the foreseeable future. And it will only get unrelentingly worse if Fairfield further self-cannibalizes itself and rejects this motion. Probably due to the previous administration, a knee-jerk reaction was uttered by this jerk with bad knees, who said something that cannot be unsaid, which I immediately, and still to this day, take responsibility for, just as I verbally emphasize every day to our 900 students at my middle school job. Somewhat due to the previous administration that was voted out of office over 1,200 days ago by Fairfield citizens, all of us here in the RTM cannot unsee things we've seen by others, cannot unhear things we've heard by others, and cannot unread things we've read by. Okay, I'll come back. Thank you for the privilege of your time, and let us hopefully and finally go forward together.
Representative Steele.
Thanks. Jeff Steele, District 2. By the way, just point of order, you can't call a question until we go to the public first, just so you know. I just want to say that, you know, no one wants to be here for this, right? I mean, nobody wants to have to deal with this, but we all know why we're dealing with this. So we have now a solution in front of us. This whole process has been extensive, it's been transparent, it's been inclusive, it's been thorough. Members of the public, members of this body and other bodies here in town have been part of this. It's been open to the public. I mean, it's been written about, and you know, we do have to make a decision. I think I've heard tonight that this is risky. There could be risk, financial risk. Well, it seems to me that it would be a lot riskier to not do anything. It'd be a lot. Nobody can say definitively if FEMA's going to turn around and decide to change their opinion. What we do know is we've already talked to them. We've already negotiated with them. They're not going to do that. So this would be nothing short of kind of Russian roulette at best, trying to hope that something would happen. But I think the risk lies therein. If we don't do something, think of those who are insured and how they're going to get impacted by this. Like, this has been gone. We've been discussing this for months and years, and now in the last 45 minutes, we have a brand new amendment that hasn't been vetted anywhere by anyone. And I think it's just, I think we're really setting ourselves up for a big disaster if we were to approve this amendment and not approve the resolution before us. This is, I mean, we've had experts look at this. We've had not just the town officials, but we've had plenty of outside eyes and ears and opinions on this. This has been vetted over and over and over, and it is bipartisan, has been up to now. So I think it'd be crazy to not vote this through. The risk is greater. It's the unknown. And I think we're setting ourselves up for a big, big disaster if we were not to vote through this resolution.
Representative Gale.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. This is Hannah Gale, District 6. So my question is to the gentleman whose last name is difficult to pronounce. Could I hear it one more time? I'm sorry.
Reusi.
Mr. Reusi, thank you so much. So as what I understand is being proposed in this amendment, does this conflict with what I heard your plan is, which is that you would be doing the fill pile remediation and the grade beam lowering at the same time for each section? So the whole funding, the economic plan that you have created for this is dependent on that process, that you're doing those two things simultaneously, correct?
Correct.
Right, so this amendment would effectively completely cancel out all of the plans that have been made. So I really don't see how it's possible to entertain this amendment at this time with what is before us having already been approved by two boards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Gale. Representative Longo.
Hi, Melissa Longo, District 1. Regarding the amendment, I just want to point out that we're spending $8.5 million regardless of where we stand in this process, and talking about buying more time. We don't have any time. Our time is up. FEMA has made that extremely clear to us. They made extremely clear to the organization here. They've made it extremely clear they are done next week, next Thursday. We don't have any more time to sit here and hem and haw about things. The residents in this town want us to do our jobs, to vote today to put this to bed finally for a mistake in oversight, criminal activity by a prior administration that this administration should have had nothing to deal with. And this is all we've been dealing with. Frankly, to bring about this amendment at this time is I think, completely irresponsible. And I cannot see anyone who actually has our town people, their taxpayers in mind, would actually want to vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Representative Wackerman. Yeah, I mean, I want to vote on this, and everybody keeps getting up and raising their hand and talking about this, that, and the other thing. I think, thank you. I'm not new here. I mean, I might have been born in the morning, but not this morning. Okay, is there any comments from the public on the amendment? The amendment, not, thank you. Name, no, come on up. Name, address, bank account number. You hold that.
Gotta hold it.
There you go, buddy.
Oh, gee. I do not agree with the amendment, and I agree with what Brenda and the administration has proposed. We don't have much time, but I've got some other comments to make when the public session, when the public opportunity comes up after this amendment is voted upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Any other?
Should have put my Fitbit on. Megan McLeod, 2815 Reading Road. I will speak briefly to this issue about the amendment. I just find it incredibly ironic that an amendment would come up about an hour and 10 minutes ago asking for more time when it's being made abundantly clear that there is no time. And I think the general mantra of everything I've heard sitting through all of these meetings, Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, the first town hall for Penfield, is this concept of risk, this concept of danger, of hot water. I don't know if I'm the only one that's waking up, but like we're already there. FEMA's sitting here with a notice of violation as a federal agency, and anybody who's had to deal with federal agencies, we've had a couple people speak about it as private business owners or attorneys that have dealt with it, it's not really a game you want to play with. We're already there. The risk, if you do the risk analysis, and maybe some of us have financial backgrounds, maybe some of us have legal backgrounds, it's kind of all piling up in one column that we're out of time. And an amendment in the 11th hour here to try to bring everything back to another board to be reviewed and everything when we have less than a week to actually respond to a federal agency that has jurisdiction over this issue that we've already frankly pissed off seems very confusing to everybody else who's listening, who isn't sitting at this table and who's just taking in all the information that's been shared and transparent through the administration, has been shared to anybody who's come to any of the meetings, and at this point I think I can verbatim repeat the entire PowerPoint presentation on the proposal that we've all known about for over a month. I'm not sure what the intention of such an amendment at this time would be, other than to completely filibuster moving forward the town in a adequate direction that benefits taxpayers. So that's my comment in regards to the amendment, and I, like the sir before me, have a lot more to say later, but I guess I'll have to stick around for a few more hours at the rate we're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Anyone else? Nobody on WebEx? Public? Is there any public on WebEx? Okay. We'll bring it back to the body. Representative McCabe.
Representative McCabe, District 4. I just want to echo Representative Steele's comment that no one wants to be here for this. I agree with you. I think there are two reasons why. One of them is that I know that there's frustration around this amendment. I fully appreciate that. I mean, obviously, there are people from both parties that want us to stop talking about it, but I just want to say one thing, which is this. We've had 3 weeks. This is the first time that we've even had an opportunity. I mean, you all are appalled that we're offering an amendment. This is the first time the body's even able to talk about this, and we're all agonizing over this decision. In all truth, I can speak for myself, back and forth, and in fact, some of my concerns were answered in the first part of this meeting, which I appreciate, but it's our job to ask questions. It's our job to offer an amendment, and it's okay if people don't agree with it, but we should have a right to offer it. The comments that we're getting from the public, what they're saying, they think we have a choice, and we don't. We have people saying, tear down the building. We have people saying, keep the building. There are probably some people that would like a new building. We've never had the opportunity to even have this discussion, which the second reason that we don't like being here is because it's only been 3 weeks. And it is clear as a new person, both to this body and not a particularly long-standing member of Fairfield, that there is a lot of trauma in this community about Penfield and all that. I understand and I appreciate that. But democracy stinks that way. You have to field a lot of questions, and I wish that you mentioned, Madam First Selectman, that you didn't have the votes. Maybe you would have had votes. This is on the amendment, because what I am saying is that we would have liked an opportunity to talk about a wide range of options, which we could have done in August, and we could have done in September, and we could have done in October. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative McCabe. Representative Vergara.
Jill Vergara, District 7. I'm supporting this amendment because I do see so much risk staring at us, and I feel like we're looking at a train wreck and watching it. And if we were to pass this resolution as stated and as approved by the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance, we're setting ourselves up to fail a third time. We see so many risks of costs, and one of them that's not really being discussed tonight that Representative Georgiadis talked a little bit about is the flood implications for this neighborhood. It is really seriously concerning to lower the beach elevation by 8 feet, and this option requires it. The option that is preferred by the administration and that the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance approved. What this amendment can do is establish a plan as required by FEMA, which would be demolition, approved by our bodies, and buy us time to figure out more, to do the resiliency study, to figure out what kind of measures we can take to mitigate the flooding. We have no idea how much that's going to cost us, probably $8 to $10 million, according to some of the estimates. So I just don't think people in good conscience can look at all of these costs that are facing us and the risk of overruns and not try to take the opportunity to have more time. This would buy buy us time. Demolition and planning and doing a plan based on remediating the NOVE and eliminating the grade beams for $2 million and remediating the fill for $4 million satisfies FEMA. And we have until October. We've been told that we're not going to start this project until October, so we can have more time to think it through.
Just point of information, Mr. Moderator, it's not lowering the building by 8 feet, it's lowering it to its natural elevation of 8 feet, which is only a few feet less than it is now.
Thank you. Guess we're going to keep going. Representative Carson, I don't know who was first, you or Mr. Astorita?
Hi, Laura Carson, District 4. I just want to make sure we understand this amendment isn't there to say we're not going to comply with FEMA. So this idea that we're going to say no and just go into retrograde, that was not the intent of this amendment. I think this amendment was to satisfy the part of FEMA that wants us to cure the NOV and pull and do the fill. So that part we would definitely fund right today. But what Drew is trying to say is we just want a chance to look at all the other options. And flooding is a big concern. I can't tell you how many emails I have gotten personally that are so concerned about the flooding. And that's an unknown expense that we will incur if we go and put according to some of these people who seem to really understand the whole beach elevation I've gotten from Rick Rauer from the beach, and different people have said, if you do this, we are going to cause flooding for the people behind it. And they're very concerned, and that could be a lot of money, and that is unknown, and unfortunately, that's a risk. And I'm telling you, I am agonizing over this whole thing about being forced to do this so quickly, but I believe that the amendment is not to take us into risk by being by not complying with FEMA. So I just want to point that out before we vote. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Carson. Representative Astorita.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ken Astorita, District 10. So I would encourage everybody to vote down this amendment because as I'm understanding it, the way it's being explained is this is an opportunity, again, to buy us more time to look at additional options. Perhaps nobody's listening here. The administration has been working with FEMA going over different options. There are no other options. Is somebody going to come up with the magic plan that nobody's thought of? And hey, great, everything is going to be perfect because we found the magic plan. I feel like it's when I'm driving and I'm sitting in traffic with my girlfriend and she's yelling at me because we're going too slow because she thinks there's a magic way that we can get to where we're going faster. It just doesn't exist. So this magic plan where everything is going to come together, it's not out there. Everything has been investigated. And I just wanted to make one other comment. Representative Carson talked about the building as flood prevention. FEMA in their meeting with us on, I think what was it, February 23rd, specifically said the building is not a flood barrier. So it has nothing to do with flood protection or flood mitigation. This is simply about replacing a building, fixing a building, and getting us in compliance with the FEMA regulations so the residents of Fairfield don't get hammered on their flood insurance. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Astorita. Maybe by the time we vote on this amendment tonight, you'll have a faster way to get home. Anybody else? Representative Vergara.
Jill Vergara, District 7. I just have to address what Representative Astorita just said. it's not just an issue of correcting the NOV and lowering the grade beams. This is a huge issue of having to lower the beach elevation by 3 to 4 feet. It's currently at 10 to 11 feet, and we're going to have to lower it by 3 to 4 feet. And then in addition, when we're remediating, it's going to be excavated by 5 to 6 feet. If we do this project, which is supposed to be for 12 to 15 months, we're going to have an enormous sinkhole at Penfield Beach for 12 to 15 months, dug out by 5 to 6 feet lower than what the beach is currently. That means that a 10-year storm, which tops the beach over at 8 feet, is putting the entire neighborhood at risk. Those floods are occurring with more and more frequency. It's an extreme risk, not only for the flooding, but for the contaminants that can go into the neighborhood, because this is going to be exposed for 12 to 15 months. What the demolition option would do, it eliminates that. FEMA specifically said that they have no jurisdiction over the beach elevation if there's no grade beams there.
Point of clarification, the building is at 10.7 feet, and it's 8 feet flood elevation. Jackie Durrell is 8 feet. The Beach Club is 8 feet on either side of Penfield. And they do have jurisdiction. They want that beach at 8 feet. Taking out the contaminated soil, we're not just going to leave a gaping hole there. It's going to be filled back in with sand at a level of 8 feet, similar to the building that's 100 feet next to it.
You can review the clip of the town hall. They specifically said they don't have jurisdiction and that it is an easier process to get that fill back in when there's no building there. I think that there's an issue sometimes with deep, but it would be less cumbersome and more straightforward to get that fill back onto the beach after it's remediated when there's no building there.
I think, Eli, that doesn't work. I don't think, Eli.
Just a clarification. FEMA in the meeting said that engineering drawings need to be sent to them. So FEMA, before we do anything at the beach, FEMA would need to see an engineering analysis, is what they called it. And that engineering analysis needs to prove, and FEMA needs to agree that that engineering analysis does not negatively affect the neighborhooding properties.
Yes, and I thought that the implication was that it's a lot less onerous and there's a possibility, a greater possibility of being able to add that fill back in as opposed to going with option 1, which we necessarily have to keep it at 8 feet.
I'm not, to be honest, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the question is. Can you repeat the question?
I understand that there's a shorter process for communicating with FEMA about adding some fill back in after we remediate. But it is a less cumbersome process than if we were to try to add fill in with the building existing there, which it would be virtually impossible to negotiate that with FEMA if we still have the building there.
I think, with all due respect, I think that's a basic misunderstanding of what we're going to be focusing on. Once first of all, we have to comply with the NOV. So we're going to go to 8 feet. Then we're going to have FEMA sign off on it. Now, if the question becomes, is there something we can do to add to the beach? We have two groups we have to deal with, DEEP as well as FEMA. So I'm not sure what the jurisdiction of FEMA is, but I know there's jurisdiction by DEEP. And so we have to go back to both regulatory agencies to get their approval to do whatever it is we're thinking we might want to do after the NOV has been satisfied. But the first thing FEMA, and FEMA has said this at least 20 times, we have to comply with the NOV first. And so that's where we're focused, at least from our perspective, is we have to comply with the NOV first. Before we talk about resiliency, before we talk about raising the elevation of the beach or anything like that, once the NOV is complied with and FEMA signs off on it, that only then can we start to have discussions about what we're going to do afterwards.
Yes, but but removing the grade beams satisfies FEMA for the notice of violation, and we know from the discussion that not having a building there makes it easier to add the fill back into an elevation that exists currently.
Mr. Moderator, just to be really clear, if this amendment passes, it has to go back to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance.
Yep.
And the deadline is the 31st.
Next Friday, not Thursday. You had your hand up, so you good? Everybody else good? All right, Ann, you ready to take a roll call vote? All right, here we go.
Edward Bateson? No. Marty Fury?
Is your mic on?
Marty Fury? Done. We'll come back to Marty. She's on.
You want?
Shall I come up there? I don't mind that.
Whoa. Not even if you get it close. No, these aren't that great. I'll hold it for you, Ann. Ken? No, but you, I'll hold it for.
Marty Fury. She was online before. Melissa Longo? No. Amy Ruggiero? William Gerber? Karen McCormick? No. Cynthia Parham? No. Jeff Steele? No. Alex Durrell? No. Jeff Galdanzi?
Yes.
Tom Lambert? No. Sharon Pastilli? No. Laura Carson? Michelle McCabe? No. Marcy Spolier? No. Liz Ezema? No. Jennifer Barahona? No. Josh is not here, right, Garskoff? Joe Siebert? No. Jay Wolk? No. Steve Barris? Yes. Hannah Gale? No. Andrew Graceffa? No. Lisa Havey?
Yes.
John Kuhn? Yes. Mark McDermott?
No.
Joe Vergara? Yes. Karen Wackerman? No. Cameron Choniski? Come back. Not here. Hank Ferentz? Pam Iacono? No. Jim Myers? No. Christine Brown? No. Drew Georgiadis? Yes. Margaret Horton? No. Kelly Cinto? No. Ken Astorita? No. Peter Britton? No. Brooks Baracino? No. Story Tallman? No. Did everyone vote?
All right, that motion amendment fails 9 to 28. Thank you. All right, back to the original resolution. Any further comments on the original resolution for the $10.6 million? Representative, sorry. Ex officio member, Mr. Walsh. I hope you were, when you were writing, that wasn't because you wrote a lot of stuff over there, so. I got about an hour. Hour?
Oh, slide. Yes. Sir. Slide it up. Okay. Thanks, Mark. My name is Jim Walsh. I'm on the Board of Finance. I've served on this RTM for 10 years in the past, served as its moderator. So, Mark, I feel your pain. And thank you for your service. Now I've been on the Board of Finance for 10 years. As a policy, as one of my own personal policies, I make it not my norm to come to this body and to tell you my thoughts. But after growing up for 48 years in this town, having grown up and been using Penfield Pavilion for all of those 48 years, I had to make an exception tonight. I was blessed to be able to use, and still use, Penfield Pavilion. It is a special asset to this town. I am here to respectfully request that you approve this resolution tonight. You are the last board from keeping and saving Penfield Pavilion. I also have the dubious, honor to have voted 3 times for building a pavilion in this town, the last one being on March 13th at the Board of Finance. And when I was thinking about it, I'm like, it's interesting because they were kind of bipartisan votes. I voted for the first one under the Flato administration. I voted for the second one under the Tetro administration, and most recently under Brenda's administration. Ever since this issue first came up, and I started hearing people wanting to tear it down and, have it be open space and things like that, I really had a hard time believing we were going to be relitigating all of these issues again, despite all the work. Each time that vote came up, those 3 times, we did that. And I heard a lot of the same arguments against it, against wanting a Penfield Pavilion, each time. It was like, even though each of the times it passed by a pretty good majority, it seemed like the people that lost those arguments, the next time we had a storm or we had piling issues one time, and now we've had this issue with FEMA, the same exact issues kept coming up. They wanted another bite of the apple every time. To me, that's not right. So for me, and when I voted, I was not going to relitigate the issue because this town, its bodies, had voted to have a Penfield Pavilion. This decision was easy for me. I spent a lot of time doing a lot of reading. I read hundreds of emails. I did the research I needed to do, but my decision really never faltered. It's whether we wanted the pavilion or we didn't want the pavilion. This pavilion has become a part of the fabric of this community. There's no denying that. It just is. I've talked, some people mentioned earlier, when I think of Fairfield and this town, when I think of images of that town and see them in real estate brochures, in town publications, in things any photos you see, the ones I always see are Penfield Pavilion, Penfield Lighthouse, the gazebo, community theater, beautiful Southport Harbor, Pequot Library. I can't imagine this pavilion being torn down and not being here. We have 5 beaches in town. This, ever since the town bought it from the private club that it was, has and should always be the gem of this community. It is the gem of the beaches. It is our showcase. Now, some people like more quieter beaches, and it's great that we have them. Some people, Penfield Beach is sometimes too crowded. But when we need to showcase something, it is Penfield Beach and the Penfield Pavilion, and it's why you can get that parking pass for free. because everybody in this town should have that right. The other beaches, you have to pay additional money to have entrance to them. Our town deserves this beautiful asset and resource. God knows we've paid for it numerous times. We still have 2 bonds outstanding that we won't be done paying till 2040. We will be paying that every year. That's not a sunk cost for me, not with a building that's worth over $7 million. But it's not just me and my experience. I watch others come into this community. I've had the fortune of my neighborhood down in the beach area being redeveloped and new families coming in from other communities. I have this family next to me, moved in 2018. 3 children under 5 when they moved in, 4 children under 5 when they moved in. I have watched them every weekend since 2018 during the summer pack up all their stuff, the littlest one like dragging a float behind them, and bringing all their pails and things. And they take their bicycles and they ride down to the beach for the entire day. And then I watch them come home, and the joy that they have on their faces reminds me of when I was a child. And then they get into their outdoor shower because the parents won't let them in properly into the new house unless all the sand is washed off. And that's when the crying starts. But, you know, to see that makes me proud to live in this community. Voting no on this resolution is voting to tear down the building. That's what it is. I mean, the FEMA decision has to be made in less than a week. I cannot seriously imagine that we're going to have that happen, that we are going to send with that beautiful building that's been built 2 times already, to watch that beautiful building have backhoes come into it and wreckers tear it down, pack it into 130 yard containers, have each of them drive down to Willebrator, and to have that burned up into smoke that we'll all breathe in, but have it burned up, an asset that's worth $7.5 million. I just can't imagine it. Yeah, we're ex officio, right? Yeah, so pursuant to the rules regulate, last time I was here, we had the same time as a member. Okay. 7 minutes left?
3 minutes.
I was only kidding.
Well, you say Brenda's 5 minutes.
Okay. But tearing down this building is what I've heard Mr. Gerber, who I respect, and others say tonight. And it blows my mind. It just seriously blows my mind. For $3 million, we are going to tear down this building and throw it away. An iconic building in this town. As I said earlier, quickly, $8.5 million of it, bonds that are still on it, will go to 2040. The fill is going to be what the cost of the fill is to clean up. That was the sins of the previous administration and the people that work there that are being litigated. But whether that cost overruns happen there, they're going to happen either way. Voting no, though, will allow their actions to continue this nightmare that we've had, and now we'll be without a Penfield Pavilion. I've heard this in, you know, I heard it at my own board a little bit. I've heard it here tonight, this whole lack of information argument. You can make that excuse for every single decision everyone in this room makes on every single issue. We were elected to be leaders, And no matter whether it's in business, government, or anything else, we never have full information. I do this at my business every day. So do the people I work with. We make decisions because we want opportunities. The opportunity that will be lost will be this building. It will be the retrograde that will happen to 1,800 different residences in this town. So we all have to move forward. I don't need any more information. Yeah, there might be cost overruns, but I think we've managed this, and I've seen enough, and I've seen it 3 times. We also got to manage the harsh consequences from the retrograde. It's not just the retrograde. We're 1,800 people in this community. We'll see about a 10% increase for at least 3 years. It could be longer. If we don't do something, we're going to have probation. Then there'll be some probationary period. We don't still cure, there will be no flood insurance available to any of those 1,800 pieces of property. Nothing, none. Those residences will be in default of any mortgage that they have. It's clear as day in the mortgage. Read any Fannie Mae mortgage. You have to have flood insurance. This should not be a political issue in town. It seems like it's becoming one, but it shouldn't be. I've never seen it become a political issue in the 2 other votes, but it seems to be. The other day, I was driving on Post Road through the town, and I'm a Bruce Springsteen fan, so I was listening to E Street Radio. And a song that's not that popular kind of came on, and I was just listening to the lyrics, and it just resonated with me with this issue, knowing it was coming up this week. And it's a father talking to his son about living in a town. And the song's called Long Walk Home, and I'm just going to be very quick with it. So the father says, "Son, we're lucky to live in this town. It's a beautiful place to be born. It wraps its arm around you. Nobody crowds you, and nobody goes it alone here." It's though the second verse that gets to me in this decision. And that says, your flag's flying over the courthouse. It means certain things are set in stone. It means certain things are set in stone. Who we are, what we'll do, and what we won't. For this community, I do not think that we should tear this Penfield Pavilion down, and I think you should approve this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Representative Wackerman.
Karen Wackerman, District 7. I doubt that there's anyone in this room who doesn't think Penfield Pavilion is wonderful. Right? It's beautiful. I'm proud of it. I've been to a lot of meetings there. Maybe my daughter would get married there if I can convince her to do that. So I really like it, and I think that's true for all of us. But we're in an impossible position. Every member of my caucus who I've spoken with is so torn because we don't want to hurt anyone's flood insurance. I pay flood insurance, although I'm not in the district that's really at risk. We don't want to threaten that at all. But there are other options. It's been ironic that option 2 is always in the presentation since August, but there's never been any discussion of option 2. And honestly, most of my constituents who have talked to me preferred that. So I would have liked to have really had some kind of survey to know what people wanted before we spend all this money. But I also want to say this is not a political issue. It's really not. People in my caucus are so torn. And it's been hard, and I don't know if the other caucus is that way, but it's a tough decision, and we just want to do the right thing for the residents. So I do want to make sure that's not, I kind of didn't like hearing that suggestion that it's a political matter. It's something that we're struggling with. We want to ask a lot of questions. We want to follow a process that's good government. So anyway, just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Wackerman. Representative Kuhn? That's Kuhn.
Representative Kuhn, District 3. I just wanted to say that I think we all believe that this is District 7. Oh, well. 3 is my numerologically lucky number, so. I just wanted to say that I am not a beachgoer. I'm, a pasty white person. I've been to the beach maybe 5 times in my 20 years here. I do think that Penfield is an important asset to the community. However, I think what we are struggling with here is that the process that we have gone through has been dreadfully managed on the part of the administration. I know you complain about not getting stuff out, or too many questions, too many meetings, all that sort of stuff. Well, that's your job. And I think that, we were reached out to a few different times, and it seems like you didn't really want to pull the trigger. If you'd pulled the trigger in August with a full-on presentation of what you wanted to do, we would have had plenty of time to go back. Pardon. But the process has been riddled with bad corporate finance, has been riddled with lack of information, and I think that's what we're all struggling with. I think we'd all like to support it, but that's the real difficulty for us.
Thank you, Representative Kuhn. Representative Barris?
Steve Barrett's District 6. I'm not as eloquent as Mr. Walsh. I'm just a retired teacher, part-time waiter. But I do believe that we are in a Republican, democratic republic or Republican democracy. And I do believe that there are people out there that have opinions different than the vast majority of the people in this room, okay? And I'm one of the people that does, so I'm just going to be the voice for many of the letters that we've gotten, many of the emails that we've gotten. It's been said that owning a boat is like having a hole to throw $100 bills into. I don't think that there are $1 million bills, but I'm pretty sure there are $100,000 bills, and we've been throwing way too many into this hole that we call Penfield Pavilion. Owning a boat is great if you have that kind of disposable income, but we should never consider the taxpayer money as disposable income. When this building was originally proposed, it was supposed to pay for itself. I know because I was the town's waterfront director at the time. My boss wanted me to speak in support of it. I told him I was against it because I was skeptical of the revenue projections, and mostly I thought we needed more beach and less building. He asked me not to speak, and I regret not speaking to this day. As I watched the Board of Finance meeting and listened to Mr. Walsh earlier today, I saw some of its members talk about a reason to keep the building because of emotions or nostalgia, or not being able to picture the beach without it not there. I'm as nostalgic as the next guy, but when the previous building needed to come down, a building where my post-wedding party took place, I knew it was the right thing to do because it was costing taxpayers too much money to keep it standing. We received many letters in support of this proposal, but very few of them mentioned renting the space for a function. Most of the letter support had to do with the message of we spent this much already, so we need to chip in a little more to save the building. I believe that most of the letter writers just want a nice shaded place to sit and look at the water. We can give it to them for a lot less money than what is proposed. My suggestion would be to get rid of the lockers, convert that area into concession, lifeguard station, nice bathrooms, take down the rest of the building, replace it with shaded areas for people to sit and look at the water. This might even be possible on the existing pilings. Why should 60,000 people be paying for lockers in a rental facility that proportionally very few citizens use with no hope of ever paying for itself? We've been in a poker game with this building for 12 years, holding a really bad hand. We keep putting money into the pot with the hope that our hand will improve. It is time to fold the hand, walk away with more money in the town coffers, and more beach. This building will never pay for itself as it was advertised, and we're just going to have to keep throwing money at it in the future. I believe that this will most likely be approved, But as you can guess, I will be voting against it. I hope I am wrong, and we never have to spend another dollar of taxpayer money on this, and it will pay for itself, and we will not have any more coastal storms, and this will be a shrewd investment in our future. But I'm fairly certain that people will have to say the three hardest words my wife occasionally has to say: Steve was right.
I doubt that happens very often. Thank you, Representative Barris. Any other comments or questions? Representative Vergara.
Jill Vergara, District 7. I'd like to make a motion to amend the resolution as follows. Resolved that the resolution entitled, "A Resolution Appropriating $10,600,000 for Costs Related to Construction, Remediation, and Addressing the Notice of Violation at Penfield," be and hereby is approved, comma, subject to a vote of the electorate, because I think that this should go to them.
I have a second. Representative Lambert.
Mr. Moderator, point of order.
Yes.
I don't believe that that is possible under the town's charter to call for a referendum.
I don't know, so I can't answer that question. But didn't you say all three bodies had to vote on it, and then someone could go down and pull a petition and get 2,000 signatures? Wasn't that said earlier today? Okay.
I believe that may only have to do with an ordinance or a bond issue. And this does not concern a bond issue, and it is not an ordinance.
I thought that any appropriation by this body over 150,000 could go to a referendum to the people. But I'll go sit down and check the town charter. If you can explain why and what the restriction is to having the body compel a referendum, I know that the people have the ability to, after we vote on this, for 14 days, they can go to the town clerk.
Procedurally, apparently I'm right, but procedurally, this body can't itself call for a referendum. You would have to pass something, and then only then there would be a petition. But let me check the charter right now again and confirm.
I thought 13.2A is the power to the people, but it's not a limitation on the RTM in specifying on a referendum.
Yeah, this body cannot require there to be a referendum, period. That's not the way it works. And I mean, of that I am certain.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
Okay. So she's withdrawing that. Yep. All right, any other, back to the original resolution?
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. If I could just clarify my statement, because to the extent that there's an expenditure in excess of $150,000 or more, then there could be a petition. Should this vote, for example, go through, there could be a petition.
Thank you. I think that was quoted earlier by the Madam First Selectwoman, correct? Thank you. Representative Horton, then Representative Brown.
Margaret Horton, District 9. Given that this issue very directly impacts my district, I wanted to talk for a minute, and the question about what to do about Penfield has been weighing heavily on me for some time now, particularly in the last month since we learned that a decision needed to be made by March 31st in order to avoid being penalized by FEMA. I'm both disappointed and incredibly frustrated by how this process has played out. While certainly the entire responsibility of this fiasco does not lie with this current administration, it's deeply discouraging to me that an administration that so clearly promised transparency seems to have delivered anything but on this issue. Rather than trying to guide us skillfully by providing clear answers in a timely way and seeking public input throughout the process, I feel like our leadership has now left us in a position where we no longer have the luxury of time to more thoughtfully consider our options. I think my colleagues tonight have brought up some very important and valid concerns that could have been addressed earlier had a more formal process for doing so been initiated. I've thought long and hard about how to approach this vote. I'm grateful to everyone who sent in the emails. I've tried to objectively consider both the short and long-term consequences of every option, few though they may be. Ultimately, I've tried to particularly consider it through the lens of my fellow neighborhood residents. I believe that many of the residents in my district have been disproportionately impacted by the failures of leadership in our town, from being adjacent to the fill pile to currently being subject to tolerating noxious fumes of raw sewage due to the broken digester at the waste treatment plant. It seems unjust to ask these same residents to now bear the brunt of increased flood insurance premiums that would be triggered should we fail to make a clear decision this evening and go into retrograde status. I know that there are those who have expressed that an increased premium would not be a financial hardship for them, and while I appreciate that sentiment, I don't think it can be true of all of the 1,800 policyholders that would be affected. As I'm sure many are aware, my district has gone through a huge environmental gentrification since Sandy, and while the new construction homes that have been built since 2012 are all FEMA compliant, there are still many homes that are much older and not compliant. If those already higher flood insurance premiums are increased, however slightly it might feel to others, it could be hugely and negatively impactful to anyone living on thin margins, particularly seniors. I fundamentally don't think it's fair that these residents should have to bear the burden of the failure of leadership in this way. I also have concerns about the potential ripple effect of being in retrograde, particularly if a big storm hits before we're eligible to reapply for a more preferred status. Regarding the pavilion itself, I've gotten a lot of emails from residents both for and against preserving the building, and a number of them supporting a building with a smaller footprint, which unfortunately is not an option that we've been given at this point in time. Given that we're at a point where we either need to support or reject the current proposal, I've decided to support it both because of the FEMA issue and also because it is a building that we will continue to be paying the original bond on, whether it exists or not. I truly wish that this process had been handled vastly differently so that we could, in fact, take more time. And I understand the desire to do so. I want to be very clear that my yes vote this evening is less about a reflection of support for the plan put forth by this administration, but rather a reflection of my support for my fellow district residents who I believe would be negatively impacted. This is the best decision I can make at this point in time, given the stakes at hand. I can only hope that as we continue to move through this process, that we as a town will start to have the type of transparency and governance that we continue to be promised.
Thank you, Representative Horton. Representative Brown. Representative Durrell, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Christine Brown, representing District 9, the beach area. This proposal impacts my constituents very directly, from the ones who are concerned about increased insurance costs to those who are worried about lowering the beach elevation. In the past couple months, since the RTM became aware of the situation, I have worked like crazy to learn as much as I can about this issue so that I can cast a thoughtful, well-reasoned vote And I have to say, I found this whole process to be incredibly frustrating. For me, a lot of this is about process. We're being asked to make an $11 million decision that has significant ramifications on insurance rates, future FEMA grants, and coastal flooding in a compressed time frame with tight cost margins and open questions about costs. I heard more scrutiny at a recent Board of Finance meeting over a $40,000 part-time nurse position than there has been on this issue. The administration's been working for 2 years to develop a plan to address the twin problems of the contaminated fill and the FEMA violation, and during that time, while they've been negotiating with FEMA, the RTM has mostly been kept in the dark, having had only 2 official updates, one in January and another in August of last year. And those were cursory, high-level presentations with only gross bottom-line dollar figures. And that's really the issue. Since December, when we were finally given access to letters between the town and FEMA, many of us have been frantically reading through pages and pages of documents, meeting with community leaders and town officials, and trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. All because the information hasn't been communicated in a clear and consistent format on an ongoing basis. And that's the frustration. I've been working really hard too. The administration is frustrated by all these questions, but as has been said prior, asking questions is what got us into this, not asking questions is what got us into this mess in the first place. So, yes, we've had a lot of questions, and we've gotten really good answers, and I appreciate that so much, but wouldn't it have been better if we had been brought along with periodic updates instead of having to pull the answers out at this late time frame? I feel like meeting this March 31st deadline is imperative. Most of the 1,800 people who will lose their flood insurance discount live in my district. And although going into retrograde is not a hardship for a lot of people, for many it is. I want people who don't live in District 9 to understand that there are a lot of constituents who do favor knocking down the building because they think, right or wrong, that preserving the beach elevation is possible if they knock down the building and that will prevent flooding. There's also people who think it's a real community asset. And to them, spending more and ending up with nothing is maddening. We were led to believe that there would be options and a discussion on them. And part of the frustration is I feel like we're being backed into a corner with sort of a take it or leave it. And maybe this really is the best solution, but the frustration is all about how late we've been brought into the process. So here's where I land. The current administration did not create this problem. I don't think there's anyone in Fairfield who isn't furious, I certainly am, about the literal toxic mess created by their predecessors. But the current administration's been in office for 3 years. They've developed this plan almost completely on their own. They believe in it, and I think that they own it. I feel like we've been backed into a corner, having been presented with only one option, denial of which means 9% of our taxpayers will have to shoulder a potentially severe financial burden. So I'm going to support approving this funding. I don't really feel I have a choice, but to be clear, personally, I'm not voting for a blank check. On other projects, our current administration has overspent and then come to the RTM after the fact to approve additional funding, Gould Manor being one example. Basically asking forgiveness rather than permission. We've all seen this movie before. So if we can't bring this project in on time with the budget that they promised, I don't see there will be support for additional funding. The film remediation will get done because it has to, but I believe it will be at the expense of the structure, and that would be really unfortunate. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Brown. Representative Durrell. Representative Volk, you're next.
Nope. Okay, Alex Durrell, RTM 3, Part 2. All right. I'm no Jackie Durrell, but I bleed Fairfield. And I think I know Fairfield's current condition well enough to know that Fairfield's house will never be clean as long as any continued remnants or influence of that previous administration remains in our town government, best symbolized by Penfield Pavilion's shameful situation. For the love of Fairfield, please put our hometown first to eventually get FEMA off our collective backs. Until then, Fairfield will be compromised and not reach its accomplishable potential. Again, let us hopefully and finally go forward together.
Thank you, Representative Durrell. Representative Woke.
Representative Wolk, District 5. First, I want to say I want to ditto to what Representative Brown just said. Totally in agreement with you. Secondly, I'm getting a little tired of the blaming. We're all bewildered for what happened before, but can we move on from who did it? That's all I keep hearing is the former administration, Mike Tetro, he did it, they did it, it's corrupt. Can we move on from this and try to, and I do appreciate everything our first select woman has done and Tom Bremer has done, really. And I really mean that. It hasn't been easy from the start. I wish we would have had more information along this way that we wouldn't be going through all this right now. But I have to say that I'm in favor. Our caucus has never said that we don't want the building. Not once. We've all wanted the building. I've been on this RTM. It's going to be, if I get elected again, it'll be 14 years. This is probably the toughest vote I think I've ever had. I'm torn. You know, 1 minute I'm saying no, I don't want the 1 minute I'm saying yes. You know, I'm hearing great information from you guys. Really, I mean that. And from you too, Jeff. You know, you do make a lot of sense. You always have. And we've been on the RTM for a long time. And I do appreciate you. The thing is that I'm just like, yes, do we want to sink more money into this building? We're going to have to. I love this building. When it was built, and this is my second vote, Jim, for this building. And the first vote for this building was murder also. And you know that. I remember talking to you. That was a tough vote. I don't know how the building got built wrong or whatever. We know where the pile came from. And everybody who did that with the pile deserves to get punished for what they did. We all know that. But I recollect what Representative Gerber said, that for $3 million more we can have a brand new building. I think that was the correct figure. Is that a wrong figure? Okay. So it's a lot more money than the $3 million. Well, then I'm in favor of the resolution right now and to go forward. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Representative Volk. Anybody else? Representative Zesma.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Liz Esma, District 4. So let me speak to this resolution. First, I want to thank the members of my caucus who, from the moment this bomb dropped on us, has been doing incredible work, analytical work, financial work, legal work, work that should have been done by this administration. We shouldn't be here in a hair on fire emergency meeting, but here we are. Due to local bureaucracy, not federal bureaucracy, a lack of transparent and a clean process, we keep hearing about the last administration. Well, he was voted out of office, and the voters hired this administration to fix this problem. I didn't think it could get any worse, but here we are. Complete with a new chief administrative officer who we were told was going to be dedicated to this full time, and I do appreciate the work that Mr. Bremer has done. But to find ourselves here in an emergency meeting 2 years after the second appeal was denied is unacceptable. Everyone talks about relitigating. We're only relitigating because it should have been litigated properly before we got here. So we're in an impossible position, I feel, for two groups. Certainly voters, residents whose future contributions to tax funds is somewhat a liability at this point. We don't have total confidence in the scope, the financial scope of this project. I also feel for people in the beach area who know that approving this will probably subject them to more flooding. And that gets to another point. The resiliency study should have been done before now. So everything has been, I'm sorry to say, putting the cart before the horse and presenting us with an almost impossible task. As I said at the Board of Selectmen, this is either a manufactured crisis or a crisis of competence. I can't figure out which one it is. But I will probably be voting, I will be voting for this resolution.
Thank you, Wow. Thank you, Representative Zesma. Representative Bateson.
Ed Bateson, District 1. I take exception to comments like that. I've been following this issue for a long time. I've never felt like I've not been informed. I read the newsletters. I don't know, just by being a conscientious member of this body, I pay attention to what's going on. None of this tonight has caught me by surprise. And quite frankly, it's not a manufactured crisis or any of that. I mean, if I was running the town, I'd do the same thing. I'd run out the clock as long as I can on a federal agency. I'd sit there and go to as many meetings as I could to try and get as much out of them as I can. I mean, when you're dealing with a government authority, it basically, you arrive at these things by attrition. You just keep pounding them and keep pounding them and go at it and keep attending meeting after meeting. And quite frankly, Bremer, I don't even know how you did it. I mean, I thank these guys for what they did. It's nonstop when you're in the room with these people. It just is. So none of this is a surprise. I mean, I don't take exception to being here tonight. Am I mad at the position we're in? Yeah, I'm not mad at her. I'm pissed off at the federal government. All right, I'm pissed off at the previous administration. That's where your blame goes. That's why you should be upset. Don't take it out on them. I mean, they walked into office. There's a letter sitting on a desk. Everyone knew that this was happening in town hall when this happened. And here we are cleaning up the mess. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not surprised by any of this. I'm mad about it, but I don't see this as a fault of the administration. There's nothing on them for this. I mean, I think it's good management to sit in those rooms, drag it out as long as you can, see if they're going to fold or whatnot. And quite frankly, the government did what they were going to do. They finally got sick of us. And that's where we are. But with that, is another meeting going to change what the FEMA's going to say? No, it's not. So let's move on. Let's get this done. Let's approve this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bateson. Representative Iacono. I'll play rock, paper, scissors. Representative Pastilli instead.
Sharon Pastilli, District 3. I appreciate that Representative Bateson feels that he's been informed along the way, and I certainly share his frustration with the entire process. I do think that in general we could have been more informed and had more documentation available to us much earlier so that we were better informed when we came to the table. So I'm hoping that if any overruns happen or anything involving this godforsaken building in the future, can we please be on speed dial? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Pastilli. Representative Gerber.
So first, I'd like to say, Bill Gerber, District 2. I'd like to say kudos to my caucus for being all over the map on this issue and sticking to your guns. We don't vote as a block, and I love it. And I would also like to say I'd like the dialogue going forward to be factual. For example, I mean, I just don't like some of the hyperbole. For example, I think talking about this building being worth $7.4 million and tearing down a $7.4 million building, that was a valuation done on a building that's sort of a going concern. We have a $6.5 million tab to keep that building going, so this building really, I think, would be worth less than $1 million by anyone's standards. It saddens me to hear about sunk bond costs as being something that we're even talking about here, since the money we're going to spend on this project could have been earning interest between 4% and 5% based on the Board of Finance meetings. So those types of conversations just don't make sense to me. I mean, if you're being analytical. I don't like that we don't have a number for the remediation costs behind the 8-foot gap, the 8-foot height gap in the beach that we're creating, and I don't even know how long that gap is. I asked for that and didn't get an answer. I see a lot of blue arrows. I have no idea what the 8-foot stretch we're creating here will be as a percentage of the increase in 8-foot stretches along the beach. And that sort of bothers me because I asked for it and was kind of shrugged off. Someone told me we're creating, a very, very large percentage increase along this stretch of all our 8-foot grade beaches. But I don't have the facts, and I wanted those. I don't know how much, again, it's going to cost to remediate this 8-foot gap, which is an 8-foot height gap created for water, which is going to top in a 5 and 10-year storm, most likely. Also, I mean, it's not like I want to tear this building down, but if we did, we do engineer beaches all over Fairfield, and so engineering this beach definitely could have been an option. I don't know why it wouldn't be. We build dunes. We dump sand all over. We pour it from when we dredge. We do all that stuff, and we probably could do it here. I mean, we'll never find out, it sounds like. And again, it's not like I want to tear it down. I just want to know. I want to know what that risk is, and I want to cost it out so that when we go to the public, we say, we know you value this, like I do. I value this pavilion, but there's a cost and a benefit for everything, and this is what we're paying for it. And we're not going to be using the money for something else, which we're probably going to have to bond for. Okay, so there's a cost and a benefit and a value, and we invest in schools. We don't get a payback. I understand that. We don't need to get a payback on the Penfield Pavilion if people want it. We're not going to know really how many people actually want it. I may be one of 100. I may be one of 1,000. I may be one of 20,000. I have no idea. I don't appreciate that the administration didn't stack, the possible options next to each other and provide calculations and feedback on all the costs, risks, and benefits of each, that they could be discussed openly and transparently. We've been given one option after 3 years to work through the options. We knew what the NOV was in November 2018. This administration is saying, trust us. We've done so much work. We've had all these conversations with the regulatory agencies. But I want to remind everyone, we were told, or at least I'm told now, that the Petro administration said the same sort of things. And, I just don't think we should be making these mistakes again. The first FEMA correspondence I saw was at the end of December this past year, just December 2022, after being pushed really hard and talking about FOI and all that kind of stuff. We have run out of time, but we had plenty of time. I don't have the information to vote yes, but I want a pavilion, so I don't want to vote no. So that's where I am, and it stinks.
Thank you, Representative Gerber. Representative Iacona.
Thank you, Pamela Iacono, District 8. You know, tonight we heard a lot about process. I've been a member of this body for 10 years. I served as the moderator, and I've been in the minority leader position for several years since then. It's really kind of hard for me to understand how many people here truly don't understand procedure. And we're talking about being angry about procedure. We have procedures. We have an elected town government that takes public comment every single time we vote at the Board of Selectmen, at the Board of Finance, and at the RTM. We had, I don't know, Madam First Selectwoman, 2 town halls on this where people were welcome to send in commentary. We're blessed to have a new newsletter that goes out to 22,000 residents in this town where they're offered all this information that you can't get in the press anymore with direct contact to all of us if we want it, because all the resources are there to get it to us. So I don't know why all of a sudden we're reinventing the wheel and creating all of this. We need new forums. We didn't give it enough public input. We don't know what the public wants. And on top of it, that there's members of the body that don't understand how our government works in such a way that we get the public input on a referendum once we vote by pulling a petition and taking it to the voters. It's in the charter. We're not following our own policies because there are people here that don't understand what they are. We're failing to do our job if we don't understand those basic rules. So to sit here this evening and to hear an entire conversation about process when we don't understand it ourselves is lunacy. This is an opportunity to vote in favor of a building that is cherished. It's an opportunity not to drive by an empty piece of lot that did happen under the previous administration. Despite all of the efforts to deflect this onto the current administration under some guise of transparency. The only transparency we didn't get was when someone decided to stick a notice of violation envelope in a drawer and not bother to bring it forward to anybody else. We have open access to anything that we want. It is not typical. It is not typical for this body or any elected body to be a part of administrative correspondence between administration and FEMA. But if we want that information, we can ask for it at any time. But it is not typical for that to be turned over by anybody, Republican or Democrat. But if you want it, ask for it, and it's available. So I'm disappointed because I agree with Representative Wackerman. This is not a political issue. But there are members who want to make it that way. I rise in support of this amendment. In support of this resolution. This is an important asset to our town. And a government like ours, in a democracy, provides services. That's what we do. We're a service provider. We provide a library for people who love books. We provide a golf course in this town for people who love golf. We're blessed with a beach. We're able to give them that amenity. Some people may use it, some may not. There are no banquet halls anymore throughout Connecticut. Anybody remember Santia's Manor? I had my prom there. Dating myself. It's gone. There aren't affordable places to hold a wedding, to have a bar mitzvah, to have a baptism. This is something that is affordable for people in our town so that they don't have to go to a country club. What a great thing that we offer. You can't put a cost on that. Can you put a cost on the library? We certainly didn't put a cost on building H. Smith Richardson. So I really encourage everybody to unanimously vote to support this. And let's take the politics out of it. We all know where we are. We all know it's an election year. Let's show everybody that we're not going to be political. We want this asset. Let's vote in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Iacona. Any other members of the body? Is everybody on WebEx asleep?
We are, Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
So you talk in your sleep, whoever that was. All right, we're going to go to the public. I'm going to give you a whole 3 minutes. And that's being generous. That was the whole idea. You didn't know that? You want me to hold the button for you? I'm holding it. It's gonna make me easy for.
He's going to hold the button. This is the 70 or 80 pages that comprise the November 28th, 2018 shot across the bow that said we are the determination and we are an NOV. There's 70 pages, including 2 great appeals and the answers that we provided to FEMA when they asked questions. I will tell you right at the beginning, if you take a look at all of the arguments that our side presented and that FEMA rebutted, they would get a fail from any middle school science teacher. They are incompetent, they are not skilled, and every person I talk to in the town administration agrees with me. The determination and the NOV are travesties. They are totally incompetent. And I just sent you, what I did was I took the 70 pages and I boiled it down in the 6 pages that I sent to you today. You've seen this picture, okay? That was taken on March 3rd after the storm. And if you take a look at the rack line, okay, you'll see where you're at 8 feet just with a mild windstorm and high tide. What FEMA is asking for is total incompetence, because what our side argued was that you've got a stone wall, you've got a sand dune, and the original grade could really be extended between those, and it's 10 to 11 feet. They built the horizontal grade being at 10.7 feet, and the beauty of that, it increases the berm, it reduces storm waves, the storm forces, and the overflow. So what they want now is they want you to lower that and put a big cavity in across the whole width of that pavilion, so the water at a nominal storm, a nominal high tide, the water's going to flow over and into the parking lot and so forth. The way it was designed was a magnificent engineering solution because it's a containment, and it provides a whole barrier for that 300 or 400 feet that exists. What I'd like to ask the town to do is I want you to take a good cop, bad cop approach to it. I think you've got to follow through and do everything you say. We're trying to comply, but I believe if you were to find some expert witnesses and a good attack lawyer, we could force them into an arbitration. And if they went to an arbitration, they would lose. They would not win, believe me, because this thing is so weak, it's so incredibly weak, you would not believe it. That's what I'm telling you. And so I would say move ahead, but allow our administration to good cop, bad cop this, because that's really what they've been doing. And I tell you, the consultants that we hired that prepared our appeals did an excellent job, and wherever there was a good argument, FEMA was not smart enough to recognize it. So that is my remark, and that is my suggestion tonight, which is to take a good cop, bad cop approach, get a couple of good expert witnesses, conceivably even go to some other FEMA regions and see if you can get them to provide a peer review of all the stuff that's in here. And that would be fair, because we're talking about a $10.8 million cost to the town. We can save $3 million and $3.5 million and get the $4.3 million back. That's $10.8 million. Did I make my point?
Ken Camaro, everybody. He'll be at the Holiday Inn next week. Happy hour. He's there early, 2 to 5, because he's got to get to bed. Thanks for staying so long, Ken. We appreciate it. All right, anybody else? 3 minutes. Name, address, social security number.
I love that man. I know it's late, and I will be quick, and I want to speak in a very macro sense, not so specific with grade beam measurements. Megan McCloud, 2815 Reading Road. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing twice and expecting a different result. And all I've heard as a member of the public that somehow managed to make it through with this hour listening to everybody is how many people have voted on the same issue, but all recognize that there's value in this building. Some of us can't quite quantify it. Some of us can't quite put it in a matrix that makes sense to maybe some of the best financial minds that think that it has to be a revenue-producing building. But there's things that you can't quantify in the value of what Penfield Pavilion is. And I will tell you, I've only lived in Fairfield for 3 years. And before that, I lived in a landlocked town over Easton. And my entire life, I couldn't wait till I could buy a home in Fairfield so that I could access Penfield Beach. And that was because I went to a birthday party in second grade for a friend that had her party at the Penfield Pavilion. There is a tremendous drawing factor to what this brings to our town, to what people see in the marketability of that. But there's also a tremendous value that we have in the facility and the events that go on there that we're not quantifying in a spreadsheet. And those are all the different nonprofit benefits that we have for organizations that are right here in Fairfield, that we don't necessarily have the numbers on the $400,000 revenue that the pavilion has done, but they're raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for organizations that are in Fairfield that give to our Fairfield taxpayers. And I speak on behalf of one of them. I'm on the executive board of the Norma Freeman Breast Center. We've had 3 events just since 2018 at the Penfield Pavilion, and it's raised over $100,000 that go back into breast cancer patients' lives and their ability to afford medical care. I'm not here making a pitch for that one organization. I'm just saying that's one line item that you guys might not have any idea about the value that that is in the fabric of our community. We're having events there that allow an organization to continue to thrive for over 30 years in Fairfield, right on Beach Road, that are giving back to the 60,000 residents that might not have access to medical care. That's not a footnote in your presentation, but that's something that has value. These are the types of events, the celebrations of life for a young life that was lost and to cancer that had a benefit there. We're not privy to that information or how much we raised for that foundation, but it's there. We're instilling hope in a community for a family that's able to actually have an event at this prestigious location that we're so fortunate to have right in our town. Is it an awful shame that we're gonna, deal with this again and again? And we all know, someone made the analogy of a poker game, and I'm gonna argue that it was a really, really crappy poker game because the deck was against us. It was fraudulent cards. We all know why we're here. And I think it was this sir here who said, well, let's stop talking about it. Let's move forward. Let's not keep putting ideas on the table that continuously remind us of where we've come. Let's look where we're going. Let's look where the future of Fairfield is. Let's look where the value is in that, because that's what you're all elected to do to represent your constituents here, is to look forward, to look to the future. What is the best calculation here of what makes sense for the financial taxpayers in Fairfield? And I'd be hard-pressed, I think Mr. Walsh said it best, to look at a revenue-generating building that still has 2 outstanding municipal bonds that we're going to be paying for till 2040, and to consider paying money to knock that down and look at it and remember the crimes that were done to create that. That's a sin. I urge you all to continue being in support of this town, being in support of the taxpayers. We all elected you to do that. You're all doing a really great job by putting in much effort into researching this and all of the information, but we don't always have access to all the information. We don't always have the benefit of having the information. God knows no one sat across from the last administration and said, are you gonna commit a crime? Are you gonna contaminate the soil? Are you gonna change the FEMA site plans? We don't have access to information all the time. We've got to do the best with what we have. And right now, I think our administration has done a really good job of vetting those opportunities with the federal agencies, with the guns blazing in their face. And they gave us this opportunity that I urge you to vote in favor of. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan.
Push, okay. So good evening. I'm Dick Mahusky, and I reside at 241 Colonial Drive. I am the Secretary of the Flood and Erosion Control Board. At the Flood and Erosion Control Board meeting this past Tuesday, we voted unanimously to share these thoughts with you. If you recall, last November, we sent you a copy of our letter to Tom Bremer, recognizing and supporting the administration's inclusion of a flood mitigation component in their plan for the Penfield site. We recognize the current plan increases the effects of coastal storm surge on residences beyond the beach by lowering the sand level beneath the structure. Our objective is to provide measures that will maximize flood protection. We appreciate the Board of Finance including a specific $100,000 appropriation for a flood mitigation study at the site in the motion now before you. The Flood and Erosion Control Board believes we can work with the administration to develop a plan that would be approved by DEEP, FEMA, and ACOE. That's the Army Corps of Engineers, concurrent with the work at the pavilion site. And yes, we will come before the boards justifying and seeking funding for the implementation of the plan once it is developed and costed out. We believe clearing the NOV and remediating the contamination is job one, and that time is of the essence. We urge you to approve those actions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Any other comments from the public who are here in person? Anybody on WebEx? Nope. All right, I'll bring it back to the body for one more shot. Maybe you guys are all tuckered out, hopefully. Please, God. All right, who took my papers? I think you're right. Could I? I mean, really. All right, let's just remind everybody what we're voting on here, okay? We're here, item number 2, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Finance. Resolved that the resolution entitled A Resolution Appropriating $10,600,000 for costs related to construction, remediation, and addressing the notice of violation at Penfield Pavilion be and hereby is approved. We'll have a roll call vote.
Edward Bateson. Melissa Longo. Amy Ruggiero. Bill Gerber. Karen McCormick. Cynthia Parham. Jeff Steele. Alex Terrell. Jeff Galdenzi.
No.
Tom Lambert. Sharon Pistilli. Laura Carson. Michelle McCabe. Marcy Spolier. Elizabeth Zezima. Jennifer Barahona. Joe Siebert. Jay Walk. Steve Barris. Hannah Gale. Andrew Gasefa. Lisa Havey.
Yes.
John Kuhn. Mark McDermott. Joe Vergara. Karen Wackerman. Hank Ferentz. Pam Iacono. Jim Myers. Christine Brown. Drew Georgiadis. Margaret Horton. Kelly Cinto. Ken Astorita. Peter Britton. Brooke Sveracino. Story Tallman.
Excuse me, Marty Fury, District 1 is yes.
She came back. Thank you. Cameron Chernisky? Can she hear me? Cameron?
The Oscar goes to Ken Camaro. Motion passes 29 yes, 7 no, and 2 abstentions. Congratulations. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Representative Pastilli, second by Representative Lambert. Thank you all, and see you Monday night. If you did not get your Board of Ed book, they were here somewhere for those who did not get it.